7:11 p.m. and pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Now we're going to take a short break while we go and approve the warrants. So. Looking at the vast crowd here tonight, do we have any citizens' comments?
I would make a comment. The historic town meeting now requires that swine are ringed and yoked, so be sure you get on that, Mr. Razorback.
So, I've actually already been practicing that for quite some
Excellent.
time. So it's
Quite
nice that
good
you
at your
guys finally caught
husbandry.
up with me. Right, Chair's report. I really don't have anything prepared. Just say that I felt like last night's really joint meeting was, pretty successful in a really, I think it's going to help this budget process as we move along. It just seems like everyone is starting from the same page, which is nice, and it seems like a pleasant change from in years past. So with that, Mike?
All right. A couple updates. First off, update on the ALICE training program. So over the past 3 months, we've had over 95% of our district employees complete the online portion of the ALICE certification. The only district employees who have not completed the training are those who have just recently joined the district. And it's one of those things we're going to have to keep up and as people join us, have them complete the training. So the second phase of the training consists of in-person training sessions, and we started this phase with a presentation from the Hamilton and Wenham Police and Fire Departments for our middle and high school faculty on November 28th. We'll be using several Wednesday afternoons in the winter to complete the in-person training for the middle and high school faculty, and also be using Wednesday afternoons in the spring to complete the in-person training sessions for the elementary faculty. Trainings are being planned by a steering committee made up of district administration and representatives from the Hamilton and Wenham Police Departments. The group will also be responsible for planning the rollout of the ALICE protocol for students. We also, on November 20th, I was able to attend our Athletic Hall of Fame banquet. And so we congratulate the inductees from the class of 2018 to the Athletic Hall of Fame. The inductees were the 1965 boys basketball team, Bill Poehler, who was a member of that class of 65 basketball team, Jennifer Winslow Flynn for volleyball and basketball from the class of 1989, Susie Herrick-Lizat, swim and soccer from the class of 1995, Katie Chen for track and soccer from the class of 2000, Coach Dan Kaderis, who was a football coach, and Coach Cliff Mello, who coached boys soccer and softball. And so those inductees were honored at a ceremony at the Myopia Club on November 20th. It was a great night for the legends of the regional to reconnect. And I want to make sure we give special thanks to high school teachers and Hall of Fame committee members Joe Marr and Chris Campbell for making that event a really special night for our inductees. So it was a great event. Also tomorrow, the high school will be hosting the National History Day competition. So students will be presenting in projects in one of 5 categories: documentary, exhibit, paper, performance, or website. This year's theme is Triumph and Tragedy in History, and student presentations will be judged by members of the high school faculty and members of the community. Hopefully the kids that get me don't find themselves unlucky. This competition is the first phase in the multi-step process that culminates at the National History Day National Contest held at the University of Maryland in June. And then we have some upcoming December events I want to make sure the committee's aware of. December 13th, the high school winter art show will take place. And then that's at 6 o'clock, and then at 7 o'clock, same night, December 13th, the high school winter band and chorus concert will also be at the high school. December 17th at 6:30, the elementary band and chorus concert will take place, and that'll be here at Bucher School. And December 18th, the middle school winter band and chorus concert will take place at the high school. So lots of stuff going on as we roll into the end of the year.
And they moved up the history fair tomorrow night a little bit.
Did they move the start time up? I actually didn't have it.
Move the start times, it's now from 4 to 6:30 instead of 4:15 to 7.
Okay. Yeah, the presentations are available for people to come walk through, even if you're not judging, so
All right, so up next, we have the consent agenda.
I'd like to remove item D.
That's on D with B. All right, anything else?
D.
D, not B.
D as in Delta.
Yes.
Got it? Okay. I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approve the consent agenda without item D. There can be no changes.
Second?
All those in favor? Unanimous? All right, the Academy of Penguin Hall to Hamilton Wenham High School gymnastics team. Exhibit F.
So I have a couple of questions. One, is this a winter sport or is this a spring sport?
Winter sport,
Winter
I believe.
sport.
So the season has already started, correct? So are these students already on the team?
I think this is supposed to be done last.
No, it won't. They're not already on the team.
They're not already on the team. And then my next question is, how many students are needed to make a gymnastics team?
We're running it right now as a co-op with Manchester Essex at 10. So I guess that's the, enough to run the team as it is right now. They're looking at, Penguin Hall's looking to add 2 or 3.
And what are,
Technically speaking, that my daughter's on the high school gymnastics team. So you need 6 kids, you need 3 all-arounds and 3 other student athletes to
Okay, so we
fill
need,
the roster. So
okay.
you need a minimum of 6, ideally 8.
For injury
just
and
so that
stuff.
you can kind of round it
Yep.
in. Kids are, as you know, getting
Yep.
hurt from time to time and those
Yep.
kinds of things.
now, because they're a private school, I've heard there's been a lot of questions recently going on the MASC listserv.
well, I started it.
And was just curious how that affects us, and did we get approval from,
This is part of the process to do that.
okay.
So what are they bringing to the table?
2 students.
Right.
So we don't need those students to make a team. Are they gonna pay extra because they're using our facilities? I mean, what are
Where are
they
they?
bringing to the table?
Where do they practice? The gymnastics team.
Gymnastics
Practice
team?
here or
Good
we-
question.
is it up
I don't know.
They, I believe the coach either owns or works at a gym in the community, and the practices.
Iron Rail?
It's at Iron Rail.
I was
right?
gonna say Iron Rail, yeah.
Yeah. That's the team's home court.
I just don't
What's the
see,
concern with the private school?
yeah, I don't see the advantage to us if they were bringing something to the table, if we needed more students. I could understand that, but where this is a private school where parents have made a decision to opt out of the public school, I don't see why we should then say, oh, you know what, go to whatever school you want, and then just, we'll co-op with them and have you on our teams.
I don't see a downside to it.
Are they paying per student
They
to
would pay
bring
a
in?
user fee, just like anybody else.
Not extra, because they are a private school. I think they should be charged a lot more.
No, they
not
would pay the
regular-
full user
They
fee.
pull the full user fee.
But we're paying
No,
part of that.
no, not that part. So we wouldn't, I haven't been involved in this, but we wouldn't,
Subsidized.
we wouldn't subsidize a private student's placement on our team with the district's money. We simply wouldn't do that.
So what would their user fee be?
I don't know, I'm hearing this for the first time too,
Okay.
for the most part.
If I remember, it was
But-
it was one of the highest user fees on that list that you had last
No,
year.
but we're covering, the district covers all of the cost of our AD, all of the cost of the coaches.
So the district covers 75% of the cost, and
Yeah.
user fees cover 25%?
Right.
And so would they
I can send
pay-
you guys the answer to
So
the
would they
question
pay
tomorrow. I don't know.
100% then?
I think that's what I just said, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't tell.
And this is gonna be like a yearly thing that we'd get approval? Because
You have to do it every year.
Every year.
okay.
So part of the MIAA's process is that the principal of the school has to sign off on it, the superintendent has to sign off on it, and the chair of the school committee has to sign off on it. So we're here.
In this case,
Looking for the
is
school
Manchester
committees.
Essex have to, is Manchester Essex doing the same thing as we are right now?
It's a good question. I think my understanding on the co-op teams is there's one district that takes the,
Right.
sort of the host district, so I'm assuming we are the host, considering they're
We're the
practicing
host.
Iron Rail. For example, so with girls' hockey, I believe Masconomet's
Correct.
the host district, so.
That's correct.
All right, so,
Am I correct in saying that this is fewer than 6 people and that they couldn't otherwise form a team?
Right, they only have 2 or 3.
Okay.
So the MIA doesn't allow, if it were the other way around, for example, if there were 10 students from Academy of Penguin Hall, they wouldn't allow them to co-op because they would have enough for their own team.
So we're looking at 3 kids who want to do high school gymnastics and their school doesn't have enough kids to field the team, and so they came looking at us who already have a co-op to say, hey, can we
how do we work
join
out,
your team?
how do we work out the existing co-op with Manchester Essex?
It's just a 3-school co-op then. What do you mean, how we?
Well, I'm just wondering because I don't think we didn't approve something with Manchester Essex, did we? Well, I'm just wondering if,
I'm on, I'll
like,
have to
moving
find out.
forward, maybe the co-op just gets.
I don't have anything to do with this.
I,
so
yeah, well,
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have to
That would be a
annually
question
reapprove.
for the
Right.
ED.
And then how long does it take to get approval? Is it MIAA to get approval? Because I know it's a private school, you have to get approval because
They-
we're public.
They've already, so Academy of Penguin Hall is already a member of the MIAA, so that's the only way they would be allowed to do this is if they were. So, once the committee votes, Craig would fill out the forms tomorrow.
Yeah, that is a good question about Manchester Essex. So if it's an annual one and we don't remember doing it,
So my understanding.
maybe we did it earlier in the fall and we just don't remember.
doing it.
So my understanding of a co-op is that it's a one-time vote, and it's a vote to form a co-op,
Okay.
right, well, that's what I'm wondering if
right?
now the next
And as
step
Mike
is-
suggested, so a district is kind of the host,
Yeah.
and then you can invite other districts in to participate in the co-op, and you have to cycle through the MIAA process.
Right.
That's very prescriptive,
So-
right? And it includes their approval, it includes every school committee's approval that's participating in the co-op.
So if we're doing this, we're adding Penguin Hall to the co-op.
Right.
That was
then-
already approved by the school committee,
Okay.
correct?
So we went then it wouldn't be a yearly
Yeah, it wouldn't be a
approval.
yearly.
The creation of the co-op is a one-time,
Yep,
to participate
yep.
is a one-time.
Yeah.
Can we co-op at St. John's Prep with the hockey teams
Mm.
and football teams?
That's my
Would.
understanding of the
You
rules.
could.
Yeah, you could.
But they
They
wouldn't
have their own
want
They
team.
have their
to.
own
They have
Wouldn't
team.
want to because
MIAA
they look very
wouldn't
good.
allow Because they have enough kids to field the team.
Well, just thinking, we both wear blue.
Yeah, so with Penguin, you've got 2 students that are gymnasts that want to participate and can't otherwise participate in something they love to do if they can't join a co-op because you can't field a
Team
team
of
with
2.
2.
But they
They
can
could still
join
do
a
club-
private
yeah, they
team,
could do a club, they
club
could do it as
team.
a club sport.
and they
Yeah.
could choose to go to a
I'm
school
so
that
about
provides
taking
that,
private
so.
kids.
I'm not
Let's
arguing
take the
their
private
case,
kids.
I'm just
Let's take
That's what
the
Yeah.
they're
private
asking
kids.
for.
I don't know if I would agree.
I don't think we have anything to
Who
lose.
will be the host?
Yeah. I mean,
I think there's the matter of principle, that's really what's the issue.
well, I mean,
Well,
Do we
someone
really
wanna make a
wanna-
motion?
You can either make a motion to table or you can make a motion to approve.
I make a motion that we table the Academy at Penguin Hall to the Hamilton Wyndham Regional High School and Manchester Regional High School gymnastic team.
Does tabling require
Was
a
that
date
So,
certain, or can it be tabled indefinitely? I don't know.
That's enough to look up.
Curious as to
What's the
what
benefit
we're
of
tabling it for.
Yeah, why would we table it?
You know, are we looking for more information on something?
I'm
or-
just looking for more information. I don't feel like I have enough information to make, to find out, because it is a private school.
Yeah, I guess we were interested in knowing the fee, that would be something we could know. Either that, or we can make a
Fees?
motion to approve and
We can,
see if it passes.
Yeah,
Well,
What-
what's the cost to the district?
yeah,
Like,
what
how
the
does that
cost.
work?
Yeah, I'm just looking for
Well,
more
the team's
information.
already running, right? So,
Team's running, but not with these students.
right. So, so at that point, it's something that's already underway, so would there be an additional cost?
I just feel I don't have enough information to move this forward.
Cost.
Right.
I don't know how, like, tournament fees work, I don't know.
Extra leotards.
No, but you know what I mean, I don't know. They had to order an extra swimsuit for Owen Bailey to be on the swim team, so it could be.
So are you suggesting that if they pay full freight for everything, that you would find this,
I wouldn't
There-
personally on principle, but it doesn't sound like we know what that number is yet.
well,
Right.
the number may be irrelevant, because if you're saying, if.
No, we
would
know
be-
what the
it would
number
be.
is, I just don't have it with me.
Right, it would be irrelevant to me, yes.
Right, but I guess my point is, like, even if in an absolute sense, it's like, the principle of whether or not a private school pays full freight for participation, whether it's $1 or $10,000, it doesn't really matter. The principle is really at stake, right?
Right.
Because the district's gonna get compensated for any expense and all expenses, right?
Well, it depends. That's what I want to know, what to know what this package is and, what we're getting out of it to include them.
Right, like
in a
if Penguin
private
Hall
school.
was providing all the transportation on their bus that they own and operate, then maybe they're bringing something to the table that we want.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, I understand.
Yeah.
Just trying to.
Or
because-
if their user fees, because they were paying full freight, we're gonna reduce the user fees of our children, I could see that too. But I don't have that information. It doesn't sound like those things are happening, because user fees have already been paid to participate, so we can't be using that money to reduce the user fees. And we don't seem to have an agreement on the bus. So to me, I don't need more information. Those were things that I would need in order to vote yes.
Was the motion to table seconded?
No.
It's actually,
It was.
the motion to table is really just to take up other pressing business that comes up during a meeting. So it's really not, at least from what I can
Right, I
see
think
here.
this should get moved to a vote.
And the motion didn't get, and
Well,
it
that's a
doesn't,
really
it
motion.
requires a second tabling?
Uh,
I don't know, I can't tell, there's a lot of
It
gobbledygook.
doesn't
Motion
sound like
on
it,
the
the
table.
tabling is appropriate
Tabling-
for this
Okay.
this
Okay.
area anyway, so.
Must be seconded.
It must be what?
A
Seconded.
motion to table must be seconded, but
Yeah, it has to
generally,
be second. It
So it
wasn't
wasn't.
second.
generally, under Robert's rules, a subsidiary motion to lay on the table refers to temporarily setting aside a pending motion or a series of pending motions to take care of something else deemed urgent. The motion to lay on the table is less about the business being discussed than about the assembly needing to handle something else immediately. So it's not,
Okay, I move
How
that the.
can we- I'm sorry, how
Sorry,
can
go
we
on.
vote on something when we don't have all the details?
Then you
Vote no.
vote no.
But then it can come back up for a vote, right?
The
Even if we
season-
voted yes, we could vote again.
The season's already begun. I think that was the point.
I guess I'm just trying to understand the issues. It's not a question of cost to the district.
No,
It's,
as
It's a
Jeff said a
question
minute
of-
ago.
Well, we don't know if it's, what all that is. what
No,
the
we do know,
information-
I just don't have it with me. So we've calculated set user fees. Everybody that's signed up through Family ID has paid their user fees, and as of last Monday, they're participating in on our high school gymnastics team. So those issues have been calculated, settled, and all the bills have been paid. I just don't have the information with me. I'm happy to share it with you
So
in
we're
the
just
morning.
adding the 2 people, then those they would be, but we don't know what those user fees would be.
I don't
We
have it
haven't-
with me.
Okay.
Those user
But-
fees, though,
Wait a
I
minute,
would
wait a minute.
imagine have already been
Figure
set.
But those 2 students have already paid their user fee?
No.
I
No.
didn't say that.
Okay.
I
So-
don't know if they have or they haven't. I would hope that they haven't because the co-op hasn't been approved
Created
by the
yet.
school committee yet.
Right. Yeah.
So we're really discussing whether or not
You
we
want to
will
allow them.
allow these 2 students to do a thing they enjoy at no cost to the district, which would possibly enrich the students already on the team who,
Or it would give them less opportunity to compete because now there's more students on the team. I don't know exactly how gymnastics meets run. I don't attend them on a regular basis. but-
Couldn't tell you.
That is, technically, that's true. So if you have if these 2 kids are all-around athletes, right, that means they participate in all 4 events. If that's the case, they could
Push one of our
Supplant.
students out, yeah.
another athlete, right? But that's the case in any sport.
Yep.
so there are how many kids?
That's
in
no
our-
different with the co-op with Manchester Essex with
Yeah.
our gymnastics team.
Right.
That's no different with our co-ops with other teams and other districts and other sports like hockey, right? It's just, it's a fact of life.
So the matter
So
of
how many kids are there currently on the gymnastics team?
I think there's
10.
10,
10.
and that
Says
there's
here
2 on the table
2 to 3.
from Penguin Hall.
Okay, but the difference from 6 to 8 might be significant, but I don't play gymnastics, so I wouldn't know the difference between 10 to 12 if it's significantly different from, 10 kids to 12 kids.
Well, if only 6 are needed to compete, that means half of the team isn't needed if you have 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
had
until
figured that one out.
injury, I mean, and that's it's 6 all-around
It's
athletes, right?
developing.
Right.
Because there's individual and all-around,
Right.
judging from my
Still, there's
vast
4 subs, so
Olympic
there's
knowledge. So,
You develop students for,
right,
athletes
I
for-
mean, that's the other
for
thing
later
too, right? So
The
you have some
benefits for
seniors that are
having- yeah.
gonna be, leaving the team, so you have freshmen that are,
Right.
moving up, just like anything else. Coming from someone who's been coaching for a long time, if I need 9 players on the field, I need more than 9 players on my team, right? I need a bench, because you never know what's gonna happen. So, 6 to 10 to 12, that's a good bench to me. I understand the concern about it being a private school and deciding to opt out of the, public education, excuse me, but at the same time, you also have to understand there are multiple reasons why one would opt out of public school education, right? So it's not everyone swims in the same direction downstream. And the academy's very new school, as we know, because I think most of us here actually approved it into existence a few years ago. So this could really be a very temporary thing if the school continues to grow as I know they hope to.
And it has to be approved every year.
No,
So
it
no,
does
this would
not.
just be have them join the co-op, but then once they could field their own team, they would no longer be they wouldn't be approved by the MIAA, so it would be out of our hands.
I see.
So conversely, Peter, from time to time, we do waivers for 8th grade students, if you recall. Those have to be approved every year,
Yeah.
which is different than this.
Waivers for students.
And
If
the
you've
eighth
been on
grade,
8th grade to
Yeah.
play
to
JV.
play
Yeah,
JV.
Right.
Have we ever done waivers for 8th grade gymnastics for the high school, or do we not have that need?
It's never come up.
So the team is just kind of, it's in a growth.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was.
it was
I think
almost dead,
Last year
I
was
think.
5 or 6 kids.
Yeah.
It was really small. The year before that, I don't even think it
Which means
it existed.
Right.
Yeah.
Which means you have
Um,
some freshmen coming up, so you already have,
Right.
the whole idea of sort of having people take positions it seems like you have some young athletes. Now granted, it's gymnastics, those, you know, the young athletes could be the all-stars at the same
Right,
time.
exactly. 18 is old.
Right, so.
Yeah.
You've kind of already matured out, at least if you're a female. 15 of you have really matured in gymnastics.
The star on our team last year was a 7th grader.
Really?
She was unbelievable, yeah.
So the concern is that
Very
it's a
nimble.
private school
Very flexible.
joining a
very
public
bendy.
school
My
and
daughters are-
could push our students out, but it's not necessarily gonna cost us anything.
So the team's already running, so I think that the cost.
Won't cost us anything.
Right.
Yeah, but because we've already collected the user fees from the people who are currently participating, any new monies we get isn't offsetting their cost. So the
that's
people
not
who are
how-
really paying for them are the athletes already on the
That's
team.
not how we decided to do it anyway last year, right? We came up with flat user fees.
No, we did not.
I thought
They
we
are.
came up with-
Every team has a different fee.
Yeah, there's no flat user fee. The user fee is
Everything's got a different
calculated by team.
There's a family cap.
And there's a chance this could be temporary, once Penguin Hall gets its own team.
Well, it's gonna go
Good.
one way or the other, right? They're either
Well-
not gonna have any kids that wanna do it in a couple of years, or they're gonna grow
6.
to a point where
I mean,
they'll
let's,
have their own team.
we have over 600, well, not over 600 anymore, but we have, you know, close to 600 kids. We can't even field one by ourselves.
Yeah, I don't know the
Oh, yeah.
demographics of the team either, to Mike's point, so, you know, 5 of these 10 kids might be seniors.
Right.
Right, and then if we don't allow a
At least
co-op,
one's a junior.
You may not have a team next year.
which will assist as a feeder
Yeah.
system to the team, you might not be able to
For
put a
our-
team
for our
on a mat
students.
next year.
For our
because you
students.
might- For
Right,
us,
yeah,
right.
because we might not have enough athletes.
Already. Combined.
Right, that's combined.
Yeah, those 10 students are
Combined.
a mix of Hamilton, Wenham, and Manchester.
But in Craig's,
towns.
Craig's email gave the actual numbers, and it was more us than them.
Yep.
He says there's 10 HW/Manchester Essex students, so I
I
don't know
thought he
what the
gave the number.
combination is.
Maybe I was looking at the
And then
Yeah.
different one.
an APH
Because I also
would
went
add 2
back
to
and looked
3.
at his request on the cheerleading one,
That was one. we wound
and
up
that
with
was one student being
Wound up with
added.
One student.
And I was like,
I want to say 3 or 4 of the 10 are from Manchester, Essex. The majority of the 10 being from Hamilton, Wenham, and then the 2 additional from Penguin Hall.
we're spending a lot of time talking about this, so I'm just gonna make a motion that we approve the co-op with Manchester, Essex, Hamilton, Wenham, and Penguin Hall.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstaining?
I wanna vote on the side of the kids, but I'm still trying to understand the issue, so I would vote in favor. So you gotta do it again?
3 and 3.
I was still thinking you
3
guys
and
snuck
3,
up-
so it doesn't pass.
It doesn't pass if it's 3 and 3.
That's correct.
All right. On to new business.
Aggie, you're up. Did it shut off? Or is it just asleep?
No. Last night it stayed on the whole time. It was
Yeah.
like quite a travel show.
Is it flashing?
It is.
Okay.
Just warm up.
Just warming
Yeah,
up.
those things are so slow.
Thanks.
So are these 3 students not allowed to be on the team, or just not allowed?
Yeah,
Right.
correct.
Right.
They're not.
They can join a team, not
They
ours.
could join
just
a
not
team,
ours.
just not ours.
So the co-op only consists of Hamilton, Wenham, and Manchester, Essex.
Right.
And so these other 2 to 3
They
students?
cannot participate.
They cannot participate.
Ready whenever you are. Okay.
Good evening. So thank you for having me here this evening to present the achievement data of the district from 2018. I just want to remind you that what we're looking at here is the next generation MCAS for grades 3 through 8. And we're still seeing the legacy MCAS for grade 10. That will change this year. This is the year that we actually go to the next generation MCAS for the high school as well. But it is important to know because it looks different, and the way that we categorize the information is different than in the past. We used to call it advanced and proficient, needs improvement and warning. It's now known as exceeding expectations and meeting expectations, and then partially or not meeting expectations. The expectation is still that we are meeting or exceeding, which is sort of the same as it used to be with the proficient and advanced, but the way that data is sort of tabulated looks different. So it's just kind of important to know. The actual score range is different. It used to be a 220 to a 280 with a 20-point difference between each of the categories, and now it goes from 440 to 560 with 30 points between each category, and everything is normed around 500. So you would expect to see around 500 being the state average on all of this. And you can see that these were the 2017 results, but this is something that the state provided us with in 2017 to kind of see how it looks different than in the past. If you look at so the orange and the green, that is your meeting and your exceeding expectations. The red and the blue are your partially meeting and your not meeting expectations. And you'll see that it really cuts off right at about the 50% mark here. So that's really different than what it used to be. We used to see very high numbers of students in the advanced category, and overall advanced and proficient was well above the 50% mark. So it's really been reset much lower than it was before. And so that's just important to know if you're comparing year-to-year data, and you might look at numbers that look like they're lower, but they're not actually, because the whole test has sort of been recalibrated starting in 2017.
Wait a minute, what's lower?
What the percentage of students who would be at advanced and proficient across the state is much lower than it used to be. So you would see, in the past, you would see pretty high numbers of students in that green category in the advanced, and a fairly high number in the orange as well, which would have been the proficient. And so you know, on average, you might see numbers way up in the 70s or something across the state. And now that number's been dropped down to around 50%. So that also means that our relative position is lower than it was. So if you're comparing past to present, you might look and think that our scores have dropped. That is not actually what's happening there. It's a question of that the entire state has sort of reset itself in the way that it's setting those standards. So it's just important when you're looking at raw data, it's important to understand that the standards have been reset.
Right. It's like if you were measuring in centimeters and then all of a sudden you changed over to inches, you're not measuring the same.
Exactly. Right.
You know,
And the state has
issued the exact same thing, you have a totally different number.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Right. And so what the state had basically said is that don't even try to compare the next generation to the legacy MCAS in terms of the scores, because they are really apples and oranges. And I just wanted to be clear about that, because otherwise it could lead to misinterpretation of the data. In terms of the different tests that were happening in 2018, so grades 3 through 8 in ELA and math took the next generation MCAS, and that was computerized for everyone except for grades 3 and 6. They will go to computerized this spring, so the expectation from the state is that everyone will be taking the assessments on the computer. Same will be true for the high school this spring as well. This was the last year of the legacy MCAS for grade 10 for both ELA and math. Grades 5 and 8, they did go to a computer-based test, but it was still kind of in an older format. They just basically digitized what the old test looked like. This coming spring, it will be a new test for science. It's going to look pretty different, have different types of test items, and be completely on the new standards. So in 2018, we were being tested on, so there was a new framework that came out for science in 2016, and so the 2018 test was testing the intersection of the old framework with the new framework, but it wasn't testing just the new content. Then this spring is the first time that we're going to see us tested entirely on the new framework. So that's going to be an important shift, and considering our data as well. And then grade 9 is where we test grade 9 biology for our science MCAS at the high school level. And that is still a legacy MCAS that is also going to change in a couple of years. In terms of our overall performance, we're trending well above the state. When we look at our performance between grades 3 and 8 in ELA, on average, we're 21 percentage points above the state. And so if you look at our performance, so again, keeping in mind that the state average is around 50%, so we're at 72% in grade 3, and you can see the state comparison on that chart. And also the thing I think to pay attention to as well is there are places where we're really well above the state in that exceeding category, which is nice to see. So the grade 3 is pretty even on that, but you start to see in grade 4 we had sort of a nice margin from the state in terms of the kids in the exceeding, and we were 76% exceeding or meeting expectations. In grade 5 we had 73%. Grade 6, 67%, but look at that number in the exceeding. It's really, really high, the percentage of students who are actually in the exceeding category in grade 6. Grade 7, we are 72%, again with a pretty high percentage in the exceeding category, and grade 8, we're at 70%. So those are our overall, yes?
Sorry. So you start off with the presentation, and I'm a little confused because it was kind of hard to try and compare it when you go at the projected statewide results, because the coloring is different than the rest of the.
Right, because that's just a slide from the state presentation. I couldn't kind of control those bar graphs. That was so the states, they are not the same colors, you're right. And in fact, that is 2017 data, so it's not even what we're looking at here. We're looking at 2018 data. The only reason why I showed you this particular slide is just to point out that we would expect to see about half of the students be above. That's where the state set the standard. They set it for half the students to be above and half of the students to be below. So you'd be looking at about 50% if you were at the state average. And so when we have results that are in the low 70s, we have quite a spread from the state. It shows that we're outperforming the state by a fairly significant margin. So that's the only reason why I showed you this. I also wanted to show you the fact that the percentage of kids who are at the exceeding category is pretty tiny compared to what it was in the past, but we actually, in that as well, have sort of a nice spread from the state, showing that our kids are also exceeding that expectation.
And I know we've changed the MCAS, whatnot, but it looks like 6th grade is kind of struggling, and, I mean, just 67%, I mean, from
Yeah,
past of
but it's
looking at what
weird.
The number of
MCAS,
exceeding expectations
The
is
number
significantly
exceeding is
higher.
incredibly high.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're struggling. I mean, they're only a few percentage points off of the other grade levels. They're in the low 70s, but they are really having excellent
It's
in
just
the.
that you can't compare
Everything
from
just
prior
got
year.
reset.
Yeah, you just can't compare from prior.
It's almost
prior
20 basis
scores.
points higher than
Yeah.
the
No,
state average.
It actually, yeah, because if you look at it, like, the exceeding is bigger. The meets expectations is about the same. And we're lower in partially meets, which is a good thing.
Yep.
And we're lower in not meeting, which is also a good thing.
Right.
It would be great if we moved more kids to meeting and exceeding out of
Right.
this category, but we are doing better than the state, which is, and not by a little bit there.
Right, right, it's quite a lot, and in fact, the exceeding category on there is really impressive, and in
It's
that,
really
that's a lot of growth from the previous year in 6th grade, actually. So, we are trending upwards in our 6th grade, so I actually think that the 6th grade has made some nice gains over this past year. From 2017 to 2018, there was a fairly big jump in the number of kids in the exceeding category, so we are moving in the right direction there. I think that it's on the move in a positive way in terms of 6th grade, but 17%, above, and that range above the state average is a healthy margin from what the state is doing. And in terms of, so I've already gone over the 7th and 8th grade data. Our 10th grade data, this is the legacy. So this is what I meant by you see very high numbers in the advanced category, right? And then a proficient. So we are well outperforming the state. You really can't do much better than 97% advanced and proficient, and the vast majority of our students are actually in the advanced category when it comes to ELA. So any questions about the ELA before I move on to math?
So we invested in science and math curriculum.
Yes.
Over the course of the last couple of years. What are we doing with ELA?
So that's actually on my radar sort of for the next thing that we would be taking a look at, is that we were really prioritizing what we were looking at in terms of providing resources for areas that we were performing less well. And so we were doing the least well in science, and so we tackled science first, and then we looked at math, and ELA would be next.
Okay.
But we are performing well, but certainly we're not satisfied with staying at the performance level that we're at. We want to always be improving. So there are certain things that we are considering in ELA at the elementary level in particular that would improve the curriculum there as well. In fact, we just had a conversation about that today with the elementary teachers about what some of those possibilities are.
do you gather any data for our cohorts with this MCAS and how they're doing compared to Hamilton Wenham, or how we're doing compared to them, where we're at on this MCAS test, like Masco, Manchester, Essex?
Comps, huh?
Yeah, I don't tend to look a lot at that, to be honest. I mean, I'm more concerned about sort of how we're doing unto ourselves or unto the state average as a sort of a benchmark of kind of gauging where we're at. So, I mean, it's certainly all information that's publicly available. You can see that on the state website if you were interested in looking at how we compare to other districts.
And then you, later on, you allude to or talk about the growth percentile part. So we're seeing here just like the categories. How do we know what our growth percentiles are?
So I didn't put that on here, but our growth percentiles on average are between the 40 and 60, which is what is the expected growth percentile. I can show, I'll pull this down and I'll show you on the state website. You can see that information. I just didn't put it in the presentation.
Yeah, because I was curious as to how that compared by grade level per, as compared to the state.
Sure. We have that data. It's just, I didn't put it in my presentation, but it's publicly available. So I'll just pull that up for you to see.
Well, and I'm just curious how important that is, because back here, I said to my husband, wow, I'm gonna have to really pay attention all the way to the end, because I don't understand what's being talked about here. Where you have these like weighting indicators and stuff.
So I'll be explaining all of that a little bit later in the presentation.
Okay.
We have an entirely new accountability system this year, so I wanted to explain what that was, and I'll go through all of that information later on.
Us too.
Okay.
Right.
I don't understand it, so
We had to learn
maybe
about
I'll wait. You can show this to us after I understand what it is when you explain it.
Well, I'm here, so I'll just show you where we are. So if you look over towards the right of the screen, you'll see it says average SGP, and that's the reference to the student growth percentile. So basically what you would be looking to see is that the acceptable range or the expected range is between 40 and 60%. So you want to see yourself in that range. The vast majority of our students of our grade levels are in the high 40s or ranging to high 50s. We have one grade level that actually is exceeding expectations. Grade 7 English has a 61.9, which is actually above average growth. And we have nothing that is below average growth. You'd have to be at below 40 to have below average growth. And most of our students, we don't really even have scores in the low 40s. We have one that was in the low 40s, grade 6 math. Everything else is in high 40s, going up well through the 50s. So that is really considered like right on where we'd want to be, in fact, trending a little bit higher than what one would expect to see. But anything between 40 and 60 is considered to be average growth, and is a sign that things are moving along as they should be. Any other questions about that?
No, but I think it's sort of important to think about what average growth, again, sort of being a good thing here, right? Because we've always been a fairly high-scoring district, so an average growth at a high-scoring district is actually really good growth, because where you would actually do exceeding growth would be someone who's scoring really low, and then actually some sort of school reform, which would then bring it up to that exceeding number. So actually hitting the average growth, right, and all the viewers at home is actually a very good thing for being a high-level district, continuing to improve being a high-level district.
Right, because students are what it's doing is it's comparing students to their own past performance, right? So if you have students who already have a relatively good performance and now they're growing at that rate, then they're getting even a better performance potentially. So yes, it's a good thing. It's really, the fact that a lot of these scores, like we've got one that's a 59.9, so that's very close to 60, which is the very upper end of that range. We've got a 56.8, so we have very healthy student growth percentiles going on here. I don't think there's any cause for concern here in the student growth.
Yeah, and the thing that I knew this just because I had a student get a perfect score in 6th grade and then not get a perfect score in 7th grade. Missed 2 questions, it was wicked annoying. But he still had a growth.
Right.
So you can still get exceedingly high scores and still have growth.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, any other questions about this before I take this slide down? Okay. So I'll switch over to math. Let me just put the presentation view. Oops, gone. So in math, our performance in math is solid. We are on average 15 percentage points above the state when you look at grades 3 through 8. That is a little bit lower than our ELA performance, where we're 21 points above the state on average. But that's an area that we've flagged, which is why last year we came to you and asked for your support in terms of thinking about getting new K-8 math resources, because we felt that the curricular resources that we had were not as strong as they could be, were not as well aligned to the standards, and that was impacting our performance and our ability to have our kids do better than they were. So this year we actually adopted the Investigations 3 curriculum, K-5, which has been around for a long time, but they did a recent revision where they improved the alignment to the Common Core standards. So that's a very highly rated program supported by Turk, which is a really well-regarded organization in the Boston area. And they've come and they've done professional development for our staff, so that's been great that we've been getting a lot of that training. We've also the idea behind the investigations is that it's very much using the math practices, which is what you want. It's not just covering the content, but it's really getting kids to think like mathematicians. And that program does a really nice job of that. It's also really well spiraled, which means it keeps coming back to the same concepts and making sure that kids are getting constant review around that. The program that we adopted at our middle school is illustrative mathematics. It's actually called Open Up Resources, but it is a really well-regarded program, relatively new, but Ed Reports, which is that sort of Consumer Reports for Education, gave it perfect ratings. And our teachers could not be more thrilled with it. I've had an opportunity to talk to all of them about how it's going, and they feel that it's such an improvement over the curriculum that we had before, that it is really incredibly well spiraled. From unit to unit and lesson to lesson, it's picking up on the threads of the previous lesson and constantly revisiting that. And our previous curriculum, Big Ideas, used to introduce something and then drop it, and you wouldn't see it again the whole year. And so that's just not a good way for kids to learn it or to really be mastering the content. And so this new program is really getting kids to engage in math in a different way. We're seeing sort of a different way in which they're talking about math in the classroom, which is what we're hoping to see. But they're getting lots of spiral review, which I think will make a big difference. So when we're looking at the context of the math scores, they are lower than the ELA. We knew that. We're addressing it. We won't, obviously, this is all prior to adoption of new curriculum. So I would expect to start to see improvement in our scores with these new curriculum resources, although it is important to understand that the research talks about something called an implementation dip. So in the first year of an implementation, you're not always getting the results that you hope for. One, because it's kind of a transition period of staff getting used to it, figuring out the pacing, figuring out the best way to work with the new materials. So that's just a learning curve embedded in a first year of an implementation. But also because there are gaps and redundancies. So the old curriculum may have emphasized certain things and the new one emphasizes something else. And in the process, kids might get double of some concept and not enough of another in that transition period. And that can also account for an implementation dip. So we'll see what happens. I'm hopeful, because these curriculum resources are much stronger than what we had, that we'll start to see the scores on the move, but it might take a couple of years before we'll see appreciable results or differences in those results. But when we look at math, again, keeping in mind that the state average is in around the 50th percent, around 50%. We're at 70% in our grade 3. We are at 58% in our grade 4 math, 68% in grade 5, 58% in grade 6, 61% in 7, and 60% in grade 8 math. And then when we get to the high school, we jump to 94%. And you can see, again, we have most of our kids are in the advanced category when it comes to math. So any questions about the math scores?
Is there something in the grade 4 math curriculum that causes that dip?
Yeah, that was a little surprising to us too, to see that dip this past year.
My daughter's in 4th grade, and
Yeah.
I was just wondering, that was my thought, but.
Yeah, so not necessarily. I mean, I think that there were, that may have been a curricular alignment issue, is my guess, in the grade 4 there. And so that's partly, that would, kind of looking at what happened, I do think there was a curriculum alignment issue in this past year, and we're correcting that with the investigation, so I don't expect that would continue into this year. I think it'll be stronger.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, and so we've turned our attention to science. So we were at 64% advanced and proficient, which might not look that high, but that's actually 17% above the state. So the state is actually, this is the old legacy MCAS, so this isn't set at the 50% mark. So that is a healthy margin from the state in our grade 5. Our grade 8 is 41, which really looks low, but the state was only 35. So we're still above the state there at 6%, but it is a shorter margin. And then when we come up to grade 9, we're 92% advanced and proficient. That's an 18-point spread from the state. The state is only at 74%. So we had also, this doesn't impact the high school biology, which is doing very, very well, but we did adopt the new K-8 science resources this past year as well. And the reason why we went for that first, as opposed to all the other curriculum areas, is one, it was brand new standards in 2016 and we were not aligned to them, so we needed to make sure that we were aligning to them. And two, it was our weakest area of performance and we knew that. So taking on the STEM scopes, and the STEM scopes has been really well received. It actually got revised over this past summer, so we don't have exactly the same version as that we had last year, but the teachers are really feeling like this new version is better than the version that we had last year. And it is keeping in mind, it is a 3-year curriculum. So it's a K-8 curriculum, but the test is a 3-year curriculum. So that 8th grade test is testing on grades 6, 7, and 8. So our 8th graders this past year had STEM scopes, but the kids were being tested and they hadn't had it in 6th and 7th. So it's really hard to gauge sort of the impact of that new curriculum program because we haven't actually seen kids get the curriculum for all 3 years that are being tested. So it'll be another year beyond this before we really can start to see the full impact of that curriculum. The nice thing about it is that K-2 spirals again 3 to 5 and spirals again 6 to 8. So those same concepts are revisited in a more sophisticated way. So by the time our kids get to the 5th grade test, they're actually going to have been through this content twice because K-2 has started to dip into it and then it reinforces and then they'll go through it a 3rd time in a much deeper way in grades 6 through 8. So that, again, that spiral will make a difference in terms of kids' understanding of science. But what we hear anecdotally from the teachers is that the kids are really enjoying science. It's very much an investigations approach that's hands-on. They look forward to it. They ask them, are we doing an investigation or explore today? And that wasn't really happening before. So it is kind of exciting to see the kids seeing science in a different way, in a much more hands-on way than we had before in our curriculum.
How often does an elementary school student have science?
So it's usually like twice a week. So we have 2.5 hours. Every school has a slightly different schedule and grade has a slightly different schedule, so it's hard to say that, but what we dedicate is 2.5 hours to science. So 2 hours are strictly science, and that's when they're doing their investigations. A half an hour is part of a literacy block where they would be doing some reading or writing related to science.
I think I have to bring up right now, she's probably watching at home. My 6th grader, Marin, says there's way too much writing in science this year.
Hello?
So, yeah,
It is writing.
So that's all I tell her, and she does not accept my answer. So I just figured I'd bring that up to you so I can go home and tell her I tried, and then she'll leave me alone.
So you're saying there's too much writing in it. As a former English teacher, this is music to my ears, actually, that we're doing lots of writing in science.
She's 11. She will not understand logic when I try to explain to her what's going on.
So there is a lot more writing.
Teenager,
Right.
and really,
Wait until she's in 7th grade where we expect the entire page to be full of writing.
So
I'm
she,
going to call you with her.
Have a call.
So I just had to bring that up. Thank you, sorry.
well, it is a difference actually, and so she's not perceiving something that isn't there. The reality is that this STEM Scopes really does emphasize the writing. For every single unit, we do something called a CER, which is claim evidence reasoning. So they're given a scenario that is an application of the concepts, and they're expected to write at least a paragraph that actually allows them to take a position on that and often use data to support their answers. So we are very intentionally embedding in. So that's actually, from my perspective, a really good thing that they're seeing a lot of writing in science.
Next time she's complaining, I'm just going to swing right by and drop her off. Let you explain it.
Okay. All right. So any other questions about the science?
No, I'm excited.
And so on biology, if you do not pass 9th grade to biology, then what happens?
So you retest,
On
basically.
biology?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there are currently some other options, but you can see, I mean, look at the percentage, I mean, of students down here. It's like we hardly have anybody not actually pass that test. So
Sometimes people have health issues and things like that.
sure, yeah. So you do retest on it, and there are multiple opportunities to retest, generally twice a year. They offer it in like February, I think, and then again in the spring. So there are multiple opportunities. But we generally, as you can see from these numbers, we generally get almost everybody across that threshold the first time.
So that's ninth grade numbers there?
These are
It
ninth
says
grade. Yeah,
It
it's
says 10th grade.
so on the state it says 10th grade. That is always strange to me because we do start testing in grade 9, but they just call everything in high school grade 10, right? But actually, everybody in the state actually administers science in grade 9. So I'm not quite sure why they call it grade 10 there, but it is always freshmen who start the science testing. Yeah, and then they repeat it if necessary in future years. And in our district, that almost never happens. They generally pass it as freshmen, and then they're fine. Okay, so I've actually already addressed this, the curriculum resource piece, but this is really something that we've been paying attention to over the last couple of years, and we feel really good about the resources that we have purchased, and we feel like they're really well aligned to the standards, they're engaging for students, and we do expect that there will be some really positive gains in our performance as a result of those adoptions. And I had also referenced the professional development that we've been doing, so we've been investing pretty heavily in professional development because there's no point in getting good resources and then not having teachers really understanding how to best use those. So our new Open Up resources, we had a 2-day training at the beginning of the year that included all of our math teachers and the special educators who support those math classes as well. We had webinars on Unit 2 to kind of get teachers ready for that. And we're hoping mid-year to bring back our trainer who will do some on-site coaching for teachers about how they're doing with some of the routines that are a part of that program. We had a great turnout from teachers over the summer. So Turk offered a graduate course over the summer that you could either take online or in person, and 75% of our teachers elected on their own time to take this course over the summer. So that's an incredible number of teachers who really got some very in-depth training around our new math program. And then we had our Turk come in. Again, these are the people who authored the curriculum. So we were meeting with the authors, and they were the ones training us on the program. And they came in October 5th. They will be back again on the March 11th training. And we've had a lot of contact with them in conversations as well. So that's been nice. And we're using our Wednesdays to support that as well. So we're spending a lot of time this year on math in our Wednesday PD session so that teachers are having an opportunity to talk at grade level as they move forward with that. And we also have a Wednesday time that we're using at the middle school for the mathematics implementation. And then we have our new accountability system. So any questions about our data before I launch into this piece of the presentation? Okay, so this is new for all of us, this accountability system, and we spent some time at our leadership team this fall trying to make sense of this because the categories are very different and the criteria is quite different. So in the past, our accountability was based basically on our test scores and on how well we were doing overall and also with our subgroups. And that's still true. They're still looking at our test scores. They're still looking at how we're doing with the various subgroups, but they've added other criteria that are being used to judge how we're doing as a district, and they're calculating the numbers differently. They've also changed the standards of how we're calculated. So you're probably familiar with the 5 levels. Level 1 meaning that the school's meeting sort of all of its targets, and level 2 is it's still doing well, but it's not quite meeting everything. And then level 3 is when you start needing assistance. So we've been a level 2 district because we've had our high school has been level 1, and Winthrop has been level 1, and the other 3 schools have been level 2. But that system no longer exists, so they don't classify us like that anymore. Basically, you're either meeting or partially meeting your targets, and that is true for all 5 schools. So none of our schools are in need of assistance. We're doing fine according to that state accountability system. But again, areas where we want to improve ourselves. So in terms of how this works, they have different criteria for grades 3 through 8 than they do for high school. High school has additional criteria that's used above and beyond what the criteria is in grades 3 through 8. But grades 3 through 8 includes achievement. It also includes growth. So we had taken a quick look at our student growth percentiles there. For English language learners, we're a low incidence district, but we do have some language learners that we would be looking at how well they're meeting their proficiency targets. And then additional indicators. So this was a surprise to all of us this year that absenteeism was actually going to be variable. And it's considered chronic absenteeism, which means students are missing 10% of the day or 18 or more days, which is very significant when you're thinking about the number of students who would, that's a huge portion of the school year and lots of lost learning time. And we were surprised, actually, to see the number of students who actually fit into that category. And we started to run some of our own data, and we actually just pulled out of Aspen, which is our student management system, how many kids were 10 absences or more, because we consider that kind of a high number as well, and that obviously was an even higher percentage than this. So it's something that we've been taking a look at as a district this year. We've been talking about it at leadership, about how can we improve that attendance and really impress upon the importance that we cannot teach them if they are not here. And so the principals already all made that sort of general announcement at the parent nights that we had in the fall, the open houses, and we are actually in the process of revising some of our procedures and letters that we'd be sending home to families for when students sort of hit certain marks to say, hey, are you aware that your child's already been out 5 days or already been out 10 days this year? And having communication with families to try to improve those rates, because that alone, literally, we can't teach them if they're not here. So it's really important that we increase the amount of attendance that we have in the district. That was a bit of a surprise, and I believe Mike was saying it is superintendent's group, a bit of a surprise to everybody.
It actually came up last Friday at the North Shore Superintendent's Roundtable that we were all surprised that it was there. I think we're not alone, was what I learned, in being relatively shocked about, you know, the actual high percentage of kids that we had that were missing 18 days or more.
Right.
So we're actually going to bring it up with our legislators. We're going to have a legislative meeting in a couple of weeks. Because one of the things that we're looking at is all of the attendance laws, as far as the state goes, they have no teeth. And they're really not clear.
The state's never been willing to take the right of a parent away to take their kid out of school to go to Aspen or to go skiing or to do any of that.
It actually says, and we were looking at the law today, the school district can excuse 7 absences in a 6-month period. But what happened when we get into these numbers, DESE didn't look at excused or unexcused. They just said, were you there or not, which makes sense on a lot of levels, but you know, there's a provision in the law that allows us to excuse days, but you know, but then there's nothing here that's weighing that. And what does 7 days and 6 months mean in a school year? It just, you know, it doesn't track.
Which 6 months is it?
Yeah, which 6 months, exactly. It doesn't track to a 180-day school year. It just, I don't, and then we have finally looked and I think the fines for parents that had their students unexcused more than 5 days was a $20 fine. You know, it's something we need to, I think if this is gonna be part of the accountability system, we need to ask our legislators to look at this a little more closely and
I think you've
figure
talked
some things
about
out.
this several times now about, you know, the excessive absence.
Yeah, as I said, it was something when this came out this summer, we all, you know, I started looking at it and said, wow, I can't believe we lost points for attendance. You know, because from my perspective, that's low-hanging fruit. We should be getting full credit on those. The other question I have, and I haven't had Karen Cecilio, our data person, run this yet, is what percentage of those students hit those 18 days in the last 2 weeks of June?
Right, that would be good to know.
Because, you know, and it again came up at the roundtable where we said, well, wait a minute, they threw this on us in a year when we all went to June 28th.
Right.
And so people were taking their kids out of school early at the end of the year. We know that. So it's a whole nother question of, okay, then we sort of got punished because of the weather. That's what it sounds like, so.
I actually asked almost all of those questions at the conference, and I said, I mean, I went through a lot of this with them, and they said, no, we don't care. And DESE is really, to use your phrase exactly, they said, if they're not there, they're not.
They can't learn.
They can't learn, so we don't, and he said, when the parents come complaining about what level the school is, you know, point them to how many days their kids have missed for trips to skiing or whatever, and so I think that's what we gotta start doing.
Okay. So, so those are the variables that we're being evaluated on in grades 3 through 8, and here is the relative weight of that. So, achievement is assuming that we have some ELL students, and we do, that we're looking at 60% weighted to achievement, 20% for student growth. ELLs would be L students would be 10%, and the additional indicators of the chronic absenteeism is also 10%. So it's just interesting to see that there's some different variables at play than there were in the past. And then the high school has some other indicators as well. So one is high school completion. So, what's your dropout rate? What's your 4-year completion? How many students are, staying beyond 4 years in terms of, completing their education? And then the other additional indicator is the percentage of students completing advanced coursework, which is advanced placement, international baccalaureate, which we don't have. Dual enrollment might be if they were enrolled here and at North Shore Community College or something like that at the same time. And then the thing that is ambiguous here is and/or other selected rigorous courses. So we don't know what they mean by that, and they haven't provided any guidance on it. So they had specifically sort of said math and science. So my assumption would be maybe any course beyond an Algebra 2, which is the basic standard. So maybe anybody in a pre-calc or a calc class, but I don't know because they haven't actually been specific. So it's part of our rating, but we're not entirely sure what numbers they're using in terms of determining that. And they have all of our data. Like our Aspen really talks right to the state. So they know exactly how many students have taken pre-calc or all of those things. They have access to our schedule. But it's unclear to me exactly what is in that number. So that's something that we'd like to perhaps get some information about, because we actually did take a hit on that. And that's a little surprising because we have quite a few kids in advanced placement classes. You know what I mean? And so it is a little strange that that we wouldn't be getting points for that in terms of that percentage of students. And the weighting of those indicators is just they're putting some of it's roughly the same as we saw before, but because the high school completion is in the mix here, they've taken down the overall achievement and put some more weight to the high school completion. So what they're doing is they're coming up now, rather than levels, they're coming up with accountability percentiles, 1 to 99, looking at all of the available indicators for school, and this is the way in which they're now comparing school districts, is how they're falling in terms of these percentiles that they're coming up with for each school. And they're also looking at something else this year, which is interesting, is that they're looking at actually, I'll get to that later. So that is basically what they're looking at. They're taking all of these things and they're kind of ranking schools in terms of where they fall in their percentiles. And our percentiles are really solid in this district. In terms of the other criteria, they really are trying to focus on raising the achievement floor. So if you're talking about closing achievement gaps, you can you can have a narrower achievement gap because your performance of, like, say, if you're looking at the difference between regular ed and special ed, you can close your achievement gap by raising the performance of your special ed students, or you could have your regular ed students fall in their performance, and then that also closes the achievement gap, but that's not really the direction that you want to see things in. So they're putting the emphasis on going, everyone kind of going up as opposed to closing a gap by some group going down, and making sure that that's part of the mix here. And they've also have pulled out a separate category they have a formula for figuring out which of our students are actually our lowest performing, and they rate us again on that group. So that to make sure that we're really keeping a spotlight on our lowest achievers and what we're doing to help those students grow. So we're kind of giving 2 different categories, and you'll see that when I get to the slide that shows all of that information together. And they've figured that out by, these are the criteria. I don't necessarily want to read this to you, but they're looking at their combined 2017 and 2018 MCAS scores, and they're also kind of looking at kids who have been with us at least 2 years, so it's the impact of our education as opposed to some other district that they may have transferred from. And then they're forming a cohort, and in the event that they don't have enough for a full cohort, then they're just judging us on our overall performance. But most times we do have a lower performing cohort when we look at the school-based data. And then here are the points that they're using. So it goes on a 0 to 4 scale. 0 means that we've actually declined in whatever that criteria is. 1 means we have had no change, so no improvement, but no decline either. 2 means we've improved, but we haven't improved as much as the state wanted us to improve. And then met target means we actually reached the target that the state set for our improvement. And 4 is we exceeded the state's target for our performance. So just keeping those numbers in mind when you go to interpret the data. And then again, all of these numbers are added up, and we are either put into the meeting or the partially meeting categories, and all of our schools fit into that sort of green category. We're all in sort of that acceptable range of where we'd want our schools to be. And then here is the data, which is really hard to look at, but I think it's bigger in your packets than it is up here. So you'll notice when you look, these two columns, so you have all the categories, and then you have these two columns on the left refer to all students in the lowest performing are referring to grades 3 through 8. That is a composite, and the two columns to the right are referring to the high school. So when you look at a lot of the numbers here, we have many 3s and 4s, which means that we are meeting or exceeding the expectations that the state has set for us. There are some areas where it is lower, and that is in math. At the elementary level, but again, we knew that. That's why we asked for additional resources, because we knew that we wanted to improve that. And the same thing is true for the math growth. And then the absenteeism was the sort of the surprising thing. So we had a 3 out of the 4 for chronic absenteeism at the elementary level, and in our lowest performing students, we had a 0 out of 4, which means their attendance declined. That's not all that surprising then, that there would be a correlation then between their performance and their lack of attendance in school. Right, so, but that is an area of concern. And then when you look over at the high school level, again, it's mostly 3s and 4s that we have. We have some areas where we're, for our lowest performing students, that we're at a 2. Chronic absenteeism was an issue, though, at the high school. We had a decline. So we are looking at an issue with absenteeism at the high school. And the surprising number here was a decline in the advanced coursework completion. And so we really haven't declined in our advanced placement, so there must be something about in the other numbers, these other courses that they have not defined. We're not really sure, so we may have to try to get some additional clarification from the state about what were they considering when they framed that number, because that really is new criteria this year. But overall, we're doing well. We are in the ranges that the state is expecting, and all those 3s and 4s that we have here, except for some select areas that were areas that we kind of knew we needed to improve in, where we're at.
So is that something someone's working on, that clarification? Like, who's
so I need to make a call to the state and see if we can get some clarification on that. What we did look into was sort of like what was going on with our AP numbers, because we figured that would be the place to start, and really nothing different. So it must be in these other numbers, so we'll have to try to see what that, what they meant by that.
Well, the fact that they would actually give it any weight at all is surprising to me. Harvard University is 2 years out from actually no longer accepting AP exams, and where Harvard goes, everyone else is going to follow. So you're looking at IB and AP as really being a thing of the past. So I really wonder what then you really have to wonder what those other metrics are. So.
Right. I mean, you understand it from a standpoint of you want to know how many of your students are challenging themselves with the most rigorous courses that we have, right? And so that's sort of the reason why they're putting the weight on that and the emphasis on that. And like in math, that I'm sort of making an assumption that it would be classes that are post-algebra 2, because that would be considered the more rigorous math courses. But it's hard to know, honestly, how or why they're calculating it in that way, except for the fact they want to make sure that kids are challenging themselves.
It would have been nice if they had published a list, which they did not.
Right.
I mean, at the same time, too, not every student's going to, just because they're doing rigorous work, doesn't mean that they're going to be at an AP level. Right? So how do you measure that?
I would say
Well, they're not measuring that. They're measuring the fact that the kids are in the course, not necessarily how well they're doing in the course, because the AP scores come out post. That's not a variable.
One of the things we talked about in that class, and they're measuring specifically the number of people in advanced placement classes and honors classes, and that's what they're measuring, things above college prep, and which is a problem for a smaller district like us, where we have.
It's a problem for a large district, a large SEL population, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have lots of kids in AP and honors. So
that's one of the
I
things.
think there's a possibility there's something wrong in the number, and we should look
Maybe.
into it.
Yeah,
But
it's hard to say. I mean, we need to get clarification on that, but we did do a little digging around the AP, and we're like, well, it can't be that. So it is a little strange about why we would have lost points on that particular accountability rating.
do a lot of our students go on to actually take the AP exam?
I believe most of them do, yes. And
Yes,
they,
they do.
yeah.
It's quite a shutdown day. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
they do.
Weeks of shutdown. Yeah.
Right. Any other questions about this? I know it's kind of a lot to take in. Took us a while to wrap our heads around it, too. It's a lot of information.
Do we have students who are limited English proficient? We don't, right?
A very small number, but
we
yes,
do.
we do have some, yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. What services are provided for them? Like, what-
So tutoring services
Okay.
within the district, so they're mainstreamed in regular classes, but they're provided with tutoring services that work on the skills that they need to be advancing their language skills.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It is a very small percentage of our students, but we do have some.
Usually from Gordon Conwell or.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay, so that is the end of the presentation, unless you had any other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you very much.
I agree. Yes. Yeah, you and Joe from Hamilton should get together, because you guys talk really fast.
Thank you.
She always says that. All right, Winthrop Sprinkler Project.
All right.
Bees.
If I could have you refer to Exhibit J. I'm just going to read my memo to the committee,
What page?
123.
Thanks, Mike.
and then,
We had a duplicate
We
page.
kind
Well-
of duplicated, the packet got duplicated, so
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have,
We've got
extra
more
paper.
here than actually
Yeah.
here. Do you want to read the whole thing, or do we
Yeah, I'll
just
read the
want to
whole
just
thing.
give a brief, oh, okay.
real quick,
I read it,
for the benefit of the folks
For the
on
public at
TV.
all.
okay.
It's a lot of money, so
It is a lot of money.
Members of the school committee, as you know, the Hamilton Fire Department and Mass State Fire Marshal's Office are requiring the district to install a fire protection system and upgrade the fire alarm system at the Winthrop Elementary School pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 148, Section 26G. In April 2018, our member towns appropriated the $850,000 in funding necessary to complete this project. The district has an agreement in place with the town of Hamilton and the Hamilton Fire Department to substantially complete this project by August 31st, 2019. The purpose of this memo is to recommend to the school committee that the district enter into a contract for designer services in connection with this project. The Designer Selection Law, MGL, Chapter 7C, Section 44 to 57, must be followed when contracting for design services for any building construction, reconstruction, alteration, remodeling, or repair project that has an estimated construction cost of $300,000 or more, and an estimated design fee of $30,000 or more. The Chief Procurement Officer is the person duly appointed by the committee to procure all supplies and services for the district. The CPO is responsible under Mass law for compliance with the policies and procedures of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts involving procurement and plays an integral role in the designer selection process. The school committee appointed me as its CPO on November 18, 2015. In my capacity as your CPO, I have determined that the designer selection law must be applied to this project, given the estimated net construction cost of $735,000 and an estimated design fee of $115,000. As a result, on September 21st, 2018, I issued a request for qualifications for design services for the fire protection system installation and fire alarm system upgrade at the Winthrop Elementary School in accordance with the procurement requirements established by the designer selection law. This RFQ established the minimum qualifications for respondents. It documented the qualifications-based selection criteria that would be utilized in selecting a top-ranked firm, and it provided detailed proposal requirements, timelines, etc. The RFQ also established a not-to-exceed fee of $105,000. Responses to the RFQ were due to me by 10 a.m. on Friday, October 19th. 18 RFQ packages were requested and distributed during the advertised bid process. 6 submittals were received by the October 19th deadline. Upon review of these submittals, I determined that 2 did not meet the minimum qualifications established in the RFQ, and that 4 firms were eligible to be evaluated through the qualifications-based review process. Jason Waldron, our Director of Facilities, and I conducted a detailed evaluation of the submittals. These firms using the selection criteria I established in the RFQ. As a result, we unanimously identified Richard D. Kimball, doing business as NV5, as the top-ranked design firm. Once the top-ranked firm was identified, I was then able to successfully negotiate a design fee with RDK that did not exceed the $105,000 threshold established in the RFQ. As a result, I am pleased to recommend to the school committee that the district enter into a contract with RDK for designer services, which includes a total engineering fee of $103,330. So this is the culmination of years' worth of work. I started developing the RFQ in July, put it out on the street in September, and then it's taken since then to receive the RFQ submittals, do our evaluation based on that selection criteria, and then bring it before you guys. So designer is a fancy word for either architect or engineer. So I'm proposing that RDK is our engineering firm that will work alongside the district in designing the system that needs to be installed by the end of next summer.
Okay.
And they're not necessarily the installers.
No, so they're the engineers.
Yeah.
So the way this works.
They're gonna draw us some drawings, and then we're gonna find some people to.
Yes, so when you meet this threshold, when you have a construction project has an estimated construction fee of $300,000 or more, and an estimated design fee of $30,000 or more, both things have to happen. Once they do, the designer selection law kicks in, and then it becomes a two-tiered procurement process. You have to go through a very detailed procurement of the designer, i.e. the engineer, right? That's what this is. So once we contract with an engineer, the engineering firm will work with me and our team, and we'll put together a bid package, specifications, the drawings, right, and all the other materials. It'll be about this much information. Hopefully that will come together late February, March, and then we have to put that out to bid again for the general contractor under Chapter 149, and I'll oversee that procurement process as well. And then once we have a recommendation for a general contractor, I'll bring that to the committee for separate approval and enter into a separate contract with the GC. So that's down the road. This is the first step. This is really critical to get this thing moving, and so that we can meet that August timeline.
Okay.
And so this is stuff that we've already sort of paid for. We haven't really paid for it, but we've voted. This is the thing we voted at town meeting.
This is a start,
Yeah.
yes.
So you
Yeah.
authorized the
Start of it.
debt,
Yep.
and the town's appropriated the money,
Yep.
right? And now I'm gonna spend it.
Yep,
Which is
okay,
what the purpose was, right?
yep.
That's exactly right. And this is the first step in that process, is to bring on kind of that engineering architect professional to be, the first part of our team.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there.
When would
So
they-
we're very much on schedule to make this happen.
When would they start the design?
Tomorrow,
Okay.
literally.
Move it so
Yeah,
we can
it's
vote
the
on it.
law, right?
They're
We gotta
waiting
go.
by the phone.
Yeah.
Are we
And how
ready for
long?
the motion? Any
If
other
you are,
questions?
I'm ready to read
Anybody
it.
have questions?
So you-
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee approve the district CPO's recommendation to enter into a contract with RDK for designer services in connection with the fire protection system installation and fire alarm system upgrade at the Winthrop Elementary School, where the total engineering fee is $103,330. The contract with RDK shall be compliant with the requirements of the Designer Selection Law, MGL Chapter 7C, and shall have been reviewed by council. The school committee chair shall sign the contract on behalf of the school committee, and a principal of RDK shall sign on behalf of the RDK.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. So I think actually
Michelle.
Denise said it
Denise
first.
said it first.
but
And here's-
Thank you.
thank you,
So
Jeff.
David, I'll have the contract probably tomorrow. I'll give you a call,
Yeah, I'm around all day.
get it signed, and then.
Get it
I'll
signed and get them going.
Sounds good.
Get it to the engineering firm, and we'll be ready to roll. Oh, okay, me.
You're
Next two.
next,
Dawn.
the
Still on.
Okay,
financial forecast.
keep rolling. So that's in your packet as Exhibit K. So, at this point, we're at a very, very early stage in the fiscal year. Approximately 30% of the year has passed by. So because of that, it's very difficult to, forecast out the balance of the year when you have very little to go on. But we've taken our first crack like we do every year. So, with the majority of the year still ahead of us, it's highly likely that my forecast will change over the course of the next 7 months or so. I'm currently forecasting the district to be on budget for the year. All of the accounts appear to be trending on budget, with the exception of one, that being out-of-district tuitions, which are running $450,000 unfavorable to budget.
This is something new?
What the asterisk at the bottom of the sheet suggests that in order to remain on budget, my forecast assumes that we'll use an additional $450,000 from the circuit breaker reserve account to balance the budget.
Do we know what's causing that?
Yeah, so we budgeted for 42 placements, and we're running somewhere around 48 to 49 placements. It's hard to pinpoint because
Do
it
we
can
know-
go from extended eval to placement and back again, so.
And do we know why? I mean, we really are not able to provide programs for these students internally? I mean,
And
I
a lot of
mean-
them, it's a case-by-case basis as to whether we can or can't. So there are some
with
students
so
that.
many, it seems like there might be able to be some cohort there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
is there,
it's-
or is there
it's-
any way we can provide that service?
I
It's
think the woman
something
with the
we're
laptop is
looking
that.
at right now, and I've asked Stacy to really kind of dig into this and figure out what's going on here.
It's just creeping
It
up
is.
and up
It
and
is.
up
It-
and
it-
up
Yeah,
and
but
up.
we're not alone in this, is something that we have to think about.
I
too.
know, and this
Gone
is
from like the
something,
mid-30s to almost 50 kids in like 4 years.
yeah.
So since I've been here, it's times 2.5.
Right.
I'm in my 6th year.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is something, I mean, I don't think sometimes the towns realize what is happening to us on this. Like,
So
it
we'll
needs to
talk
be.
a lot about this in 2 weeks,
Because
because
it's gonna
it's-
show up in our budget
Yeah.
proposal for next year.
right,
Um,
and we'll have Stacy come in probably, Mike and I haven't talked about this yet, probably the January 2nd meeting, because it is one of our biggest concerns.
Yeah, I would almost like to see
So-
just a specific analysis on just that, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what we're looking at.
So, in terms of a forecast, I felt that it was very important to kind of call it out as early as possible. As we had discussed before, our circuit breaker reserve account balance at the end of FY '18 was $475,000. Our circuit breaker claim submittal was for obvious reasons, exceeded what we had budgeted, right? And I'm expecting to receive about $75,000 more than we had budgeted for in FY '19. So if that comes through, you're talking about a circuit breaker account balance of $550K. We're at $450K right now. So I'll keep you updated, but we'll have a lot of discussions about
Is
this.
I mean, I'm just like, how do we not know about these, like, 6, 7 people, kids, not people, but kids, it's just,
It's easy not to know, but.
Yeah, I mean, with all the HIPAA and privacy laws.
And
it's
that's not what
really-
she's saying. She's like, how did we not have some inkling that these kids were going out of district 6 months ago when we put the budget together?
So when we put in everybody's defense, when we develop a budget, we're mindful of what the costs are, right? So when we develop the budget for out-of-district placement tuitions, we look at what we know are gonna be our placements, right? We don't include what we think. We call them our highly likely placements. Otherwise, we'll be asking for 7, 8, 9% every year, right? So we go through a very rigorous process. We identify and we project what we know, and that's what we include in the budget. And what we knew versus what happened is different. And that's what's been happening for the last 5 or 6 years.
I
I know.
and I think we need to have a more in-depth analysis of what's going on there.
We gotta figure out about this hemorrhaging.
I mean,
Well, again, it's not a unique process.
I'm
and
not
I
saying
mean,
it's not
it,
unique, it's just,
But I think that, Michelle, from your standpoint as a middle school teacher, right? Just think about how
You-
developmentally things go through where
I
you're
know,
thinking
but
someone's
you
on
would-
track, and then they can, how easily it is for someone to shoot off
You
track
would
in any sort of
not
a-
believe how painful it is in my school district to get a child who clearly needs an out-of-district placement outplaced.
That's, you know, and that's
I mean,
coming,
it
that's coming,
takes
that's
a
from,
lot.
right, and that's from the district's perspective. I'll tell you the different, you know, and this is something Stacy and I have talked about, the different phenomenon that we have here is that we have parents who have the wherewithal to privately place their children into
Yes.
into an outside placement. They have the wherewithal to hire an attorney.
Yes, they do.
And then to sue us
Yes, they
for
do.
that placement. And that's something that's, Stacy has, you know, said happens more frequently than we'd like to know. And as, you know, I don't know if you know anything about how BSEA works, they are not district-friendly. And so generally, once we get into that process, it becomes a risk management exercise where, you know, we're trying to negotiate a settlement agreement rather than go to the Bureau of Special Education Appeals, lose the appeal, and then have to pay court costs on top of what the out-of-district placement is. So I mean, that's, you know,
Jeff,
it is
can-
the nature of the community, so that's, you know, something that we are, you know, dealing with. It's not something that I think we're just flipping over and saying, sure, we can have, here's an out-of-district placement. I think it's, for a lot of our students, it's that piece. I think we also look at, we have a pretty large, you know, severe special needs program at the Winthrop School.
Yes, we do.
And when those students hit 6th grade, they're big. And, you know, having the programmatic needs for, you know, what's basically an adult-sized, you know, 6th grader with some very severe needs is not something we're equipped as a district to handle. And so those are the pieces that we look at. You know,
Jeff?
I also look at some of the residential placements are actually a result of families not being able to make it work for their children at home
Yeah.
when they have those kinds of needs.
Yep.
So
So,
it would be interesting
lot
to
that goes into
know
it.
just a breakdown of where students are going, so
Yeah.
we can understand what are we talking about here?
Yeah,
Are we
I think
talking
that's-
about medical issues? Are we talking about learning disabilities? Like, what kinds of outplacements are we talking about?
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
are we
I
talking
would
about
like to understand it
autism?
more.
Like, what are we talking
Yep.
about? Yeah.
And the other thing is too, are these people moving into our district to know that we're providing the services? Are we now above the average in the state for services?
Yeah,
I mean,
that
it
would
just,
That
I
would be
mean-
good, even just
It's actually a really good
if
point.
people who are outplaced started here in kindergarten.
good question. Okay.
yeah, I just would like to know.
Because that's a
the
myth
trend
out
is
there that
only-
people move here to get special ed services.
Right, I've heard
And if
that.
it's true that these children were born here, which I know some of them were, then you can at least debunk that myth before people start blaming
Right.
that.
We have to be very careful with
With
the
how
information
we share and what we share.
present.
No,
I
I
know, that's why
totally
I'm
understand,
trying
but
to
they
think
just,
of, I'm trying to think of something that would be long-range and anonymous.
but it's also helpful to when,
changed
you
my
know, the
dissertation.
towns are asking, you know, what's going on, and we're just saying, this is what's going on. These are, you know, if they're listening, you know, like.
That's why,
Yeah.
that's why we're gonna have a presentation.
Yeah, and I think we definitely need to make sure that we.
And a chart, we need a big chart.
Right. And
Chart.
make sure that
Is
we
that
invite everyone, letting them know
all
exactly what it's
New
gonna be.
people, or
and
is
get-
there a
get the
delta
right
in
people in
change
the
of
door.
tuition?
Would love to know if, yeah, like, you know,
We need a
did they,
logo.
were they born here, or did they move here? Oh, let's
So
now
that-
come
that's
to
where
the
you start
school
getting into
district.
a little bit of a gray area.
I know,
but
but
Yeah,
if
but
there's,
you
if
could
we
still
can
kind
think
of-
of a way that we can be sensitive to the privateness
Right.
and debunk the myth simultaneously. I don't know if we can.
Yeah, we'll have to look at that one.
I don't know, I'm just saying, is there a way? All right.
So that's the forecast. And it'll bleed into our budget presentation for for 2 weeks from today. I know.
Yeah, me too.
Very rarely do I wake up at 3 in the morning, but it's happened more often than not lately.
Okay, what's next?
Well,
Do you
Feel like going again? Or is this Mike's?
So, I can start, Mike, and then
So
you.
start, and I
did you,
have some of
Long
yours
Meadow?
and some are mine. Oh,
So why don't we
What? I'm sorry.
start, we'll
Oh,
start big picture?
Enrollment report, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
The enrollment report?
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm gonna start at the
over it, I
back
crossed it
of
off the back.
what was,
so it's
put in the
one-
packet. So page 36. And then I'll talk a little bit about, so this is total enrollment, 5 or 6 year kind of trend. The slides prior to that are focused on resident enrollment, which you all know is a really important piece of data in terms of setting and apportioning our budgets to our member towns. So I'll talk a little bit about that next, and then I'll hand it off to Mike, and he can talk about class size and data at the high school, et cetera, et cetera. So real quick, that last schedule on 136, you can see that, and these are October 1 numbers, which is a kind of a critical juncture for our SIM submittal to DESE. Used to do our own thing in the district, as well as to calculate Chapter 70 funding, et cetera. So columns to the far right, you can see that total district enrollment decreased by 5 this year versus prior year. The makeup of that modest reduction is interesting. So resident enrollment decreased by 40, offset by increases in choice of around 30 and a modest number in pre-K. So the concerning statistic to me is the decrease in the resident enrollment of 40. So if you slide back to the other slides, go to page 131, you can see that our apportionment calculation, again, is in the regional agreement, is based on the 3-year trend. And you can see that the trend of Wenham, assuming a greater share of our enrollment, continues to a lesser extent than the last 3 years. But you can see at what I'll call a shift of about 0.6 of a point moving towards Wenham. That translates into roughly $170,000 worth of dollars moving from Hamilton to Wenham in the budget process. Over the course of the last 5 years, inclusive of this number, just the enrollment shift, excluding any operational increases, approximately $1.5 million has shifted from Hamilton to Wenham during that period of time. So Mike, I'll hand it to you to go to.
Can I just ask one quick question,
Sure.
and you may or may not know? You mentioned that the resident enrollment decreasing by 40
Yep.
students about. Was that just, we had more residents graduate and fewer residents come in? Or did we have it that fewer residents, like residents left and went to private schools?
The former is what my quick analysis is. I didn't dig in.
I'm sorry.
So it's
I'm
more-
missing-
so
wait,
it's
what's
We
your
more-
didn't have a bubble this year.
Okay.
Which would have, a kindergarten bubble.
Yeah.
Which would, two continue, 2 years of a bubble in a row would have helped to alleviate that kind of graduating out. It could be a mixture of the two things you talked about, but I'm gonna guess it was just a larger class.
So last
moving
year,
up
I
and
know
moving
there was a large, as they, going through the years, I just know last year's graduating class was a little bit larger than this year's seniors. And then next year, seniors are more. It kind of goes up and
Yeah,
down, just seeing,
That's that bubble factor that I
Right.
talked
Yeah.
about, right?
but
So-
we had a large kindergarten.
So last year,
so-
but not that large.
Not last year, it was 2 years ago.
Oh,
so
two
last year versus the prior year,
Yep,
we had an increase of 3 students in total,
You should have 6.
and we had a decrease in choice, so we had an increase in residents. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
This year, we saw the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we opened the choice program up to middle school,
Yeah.
which we
was
talked about a few meetings
saved us.
ago.
I mean, we
which
needed
was,
that.
you know,
It leveled off
Helpful.
the middle school
Helpful.
nicely.
Yeah, levels it out a little bit.
right.
We'll have to see, yeah, I mean, we have to analyze
It'll
the
be
success
interesting
of
to
that in a
see
few
what
years.
opens up for the high school, you know, when those middle school get to the high school, kind of where our needs are, and if some of them drop out or not.
I
Just
think
curious.
next year will be interesting from the middle school's perspective, because it'll be year 2 and people know about it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And my hope is that, you know, the numbers are far greater than we saw in the first year, and then it continues to feed
Yep.
through so that we can get to what we define as our capacity, right, the seats on the bus.
Yeah.
Right, that would be ideal. At the same time, our resident enrollment really kind of flattening it out, and we don't see these shifts. That would be great.
So speaking, just, I guess, maybe it's off subject, but I noticed like some buses are really packed with kids, and then some buses, you know, aren't packed. You know, just, you know, it's hard to keep that whole route, but,
Yeah,
You know-
that's routing and scheduling and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And our
But-
transportation company does that for us.
I just notice it as
Yeah.
far as, you know, how many kids we have at certain
Right.
ages.
It varies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So I'll hand it to Mike if
Okay.
you guys don't have any other questions.
And I drilled down into sort of the class sizes pieces, so on page 128.
Holy
Start
smokes.
off with the elementary class sizes at the our 3 elementary schools. As Jeff had already mentioned, this year in kindergarten, we did not have what we called the bubble, where we needed a 3rd kindergarten in one of our schools. So, again, 2 kindergarten classes at, a high of 23 and a low of 19, for 127 that came in. And as you look at those elementary class sizes, even just down that list, you're looking at class sizes of about 120, 127, 141 is the largest there. So there's sort of this ebb and flow of that bubble that comes in every couple of years. But, when you go back to the piece Jeff was just looking at, you look at some of those high school class sizes, last year's senior class was 133.
This is like
This year's is 145, and so again, we are not bringing in as many kids as we're actually graduating on a year-over-year basis, so you can see that. In our
The other
averages.
issues, we're not retaining them. We're not retaining them from grade to grade.
No, yeah, and we do have
Because there's
a loss from grade to
5,
grade.
6,
Yeah,
4, 6,
yeah,
yeah, from one grade to the next.
yeah, it does
Or from prior year
change
to
year
this
to year.
year. Yeah.
And how does it, you were talking a little bit about it last night, about the McKibben report. Is he on
Yeah,
track?
at least, from what Peter
With his
Lombardi looked at, yeah,
projections?
his projection was right there with what we actually saw come in.
Okay.
So it was accurate for this year at least. So yeah, so it's just overall for those K to 5 classes, we're averaging just at about 20 students per class.
How many total students live in our community but do not go to our schools?
I think
You were just
it's
doing it for
scary that I know
NESDEC.
the answer to this question.
You were just doing it for
So,
NESDEC.
There's 202 kids that go to private schools in.
Or
Parks.
homeschool?
No,
private schools.
and then there's an additional, I'm not gonna say a number on the whole school.
Okay, but then, there's an additional number that are
Yes,
homeschooled,
yeah,
which may be
yeah.
5 or
Oh, yeah.
50, we don't know.
Yeah, pull up my email
Okay.
to the, yeah, so Mike and I prepare an enrollment analysis by town that we submit to NESDEC, and I completed it last week, and I
Yeah.
submitted it. I think it was
just
on
trying to find it.
the Monday, what was the Monday after Thanksgiving?
How do you figure out the enrollment at private schools of,
We're
asked-
responsible.
We
Well,
contact
call them.
every private school.
oh, you do?
Oh, yeah, every single school. It's brutal.
Because we're responsible
in
to
what
be sure that they're
geographic-
enrolled in a school.
Gene, you would be
We're
amazed
responsible
at some
for
of the things we do.
Some of the calls, yeah, the
Not
things
this-
that we
not
have to
special
do.
kids. I'm talking about like regular kids.
No,
We're
right.
Gotta be an easier
responsible
way to do
to make
that.
sure that every kid is meeting their compulsory
It was the
enrollment.
Monday after Thanksgiving, so
Yes.
it's at the 28th or something.
That I didn't know. That was nothing crazy.
You know, I find interesting is I actually know of a couple of students who choiced in like at junior and senior year,
This year, yeah.
this year, as junior, senior, and I know we dropped one, because I just know who
They
it
left,
was,
yeah.
that dropped, who was a choice and
So
went
we
back to the
have-
school
We got it.
district.
So we need both.
So this is, which one is this one?
So there's 106, what's that?
Well, they
Is
have to
Hamilton
file
or-
a report. with
Write
the
these numbers down,
district.
somebody. Wenham has 100 and, what's that number? 116?
116.
116 private. Oh, go back one, open that back up. And then go, what's that?
Choice, or homeschool is 9.
So they have 116 and 9,
Really? I might know them all.
and then Hamilton has
202, is that number? Yeah.
oh, they have 202, so
Hamilton has
202.
202 and
Oh,
40.
wow.
Wait,
And
who has
40.
202?
Hamilton,
40.
So there's
and 40 homeschool?
318
Yeah.
go to private school, and there's
Sorry, what?
49 that are homeschooled.
Kids.
Total.
49 homeschooled and 202 private.
318. There was
In
two-
Hamilton?
There was
Total.
202 in, yeah,
202 in Hamilton,
and
Okay,
then
yeah,
116 in Wenham. So 318 private,
Yep.
49
homeschool.
Wow.
homeschool. And we
Okay.
have 1,715 that go to school here.
Wow.
Yeah, that's your declining one.
400.
Huge, oh my
So
God.
20% of the kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was,
Don't
just-
go
I
to
was
our
just gonna
school.
calculate it, but if you're
Yeah.
good at math like
Yeah,
that, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm pretty good like that.
Wow.
So let me ask you this, is there,
And we count those
Wow.
kids individually by name.
We call them.
Yeah, that's
We
crazy.
call the schools.
so is there any thought, maybe, you may have asked this question in the past, is there any thought of surveying why they are electing to go to a different school? Like a private school or a homeschool? Like, is that even
Hold
allowed
that
to
thought
do?
for a second, plus there's, I think, 23 kids that go to the Essex Tech.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many?
Plus 23 to
23.
Essex Tech. Or
Career
more.
Tech enrollments is 11
11 plus 10, I think.
So that's 21,
and 13.
24.
24?
Forgot about that one. Gene, I'm
And-
sorry. I
Well,
interrupted
and
you.
do we still have the kids at the charter school?
One.
So we have, and one at a charter school.
Right, right.
Okay.
So that's 401 kids.
Yeah. A lot of kids. Yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
So you were asking a
Across
question, and I just thought Essex
Yeah,
Tech.
is it even allowed to sort of ask and survey,
Oh, and we have
Why-
choice
why-
out kids.
Right.
why the,
15.
So that's 416 kids.
416.
A lot of kids.
So this is you know, this district's always had a lot of kids going to private school, you know, but it's shocking to see the numbers and just sort of thinking about where our
We're up
numbers
to
in our schools would be.
416.
So, yeah, no, I wrote it down.
400, that's
But I
just
mean,
like,
at the same point,
so, and
we're
we
still
have
getting
how
that money.
many in our school district?
right, they're still paying
600?
taxes in the
Oh, that's what I
town.
mean, they don't
I
get
know
reimbursed.
they're-
They don't get
100 kids?
They don't get a
What?
reduction of taxes for
So
going
No,
to a
they
private
don't.
school.
No, what'd you
So they're
say?
actually
I'm
paying
sorry.
two tuitions. They're paying the,
True.
in
Paying
China.
Are those
taxes.
only at high school, or are those district-wide?
So we've got a total population of 2,100-ish, right? And 420,
So that's around 20% go to
20%.
private
right?
or other type.
I mean,
Kids that don't
It's
go
actually-
here.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
actually a high correlation number with districts that have high educational achievement in general.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so,
Okay.
where this is really a problem,
And that's something to know.
yeah.
where
We'd
this
have
is
to
a
hire
problem
teachers.
is.
It was 10 years ago on my dissertation, it was one of the factors I used, and it actually lines up very well with MCAS scores, the higher percentage of kids in private school, it's a socioeconomic factor that
Oh, okay.
that
It's
families have.
correlated, but there's
Families
no-
have the wherewithal.
But our
Did
question
you see
is,
any causation to that?
I didn't go into the causation piece, but seems to be, you know, as a community that is more affluent, that has, you know, family, higher educational attainment of the actual, of the
Yeah, sure.
parents, you know, so that all of those factors kind of lead into a higher private school
Yeah.
population. So if you looked at other districts with similar demographics, you're gonna see similar numbers.
Like Manchester, Essex.
Yeah.
Performance makes sense.
so do we have that information available through NASDAQ, or we provide that information for us, but we can't get it about other districts?
Provide,
The report that Jeff was just doing?
yeah, I don't know, NASDAQ doesn't publish that as far as I
Okay,
know.
so we provide the information, they
Although-
use it, but they don't give us the information. If
I have to figure out, actually, it's part of the census, I think.
But, I
Is
mean,
it?
you could also email.
I got it, I got it from somewhere, and I wanna say it was from, it's part of the deep dive the US Census does every 10 years.
Really?
They ask for children enrolled in
Oh,
private
yeah,
schools.
that'll be,
Maybe not this year.
So then it
that'll
becomes
be quite
really
a few
old.
years
I
from
don't know
now.
what they're gonna do, and-
It's like
Like
it's
4
really
years
old
from now, that'll come
information.
out. Okay.
Okay.
But like I said,
So it does correlate highly, you know, so when I hear it, I'm not particularly surprised, but it's a big number.
But I mean, this is, where this number is really important is is really for the people who were here last night, right? Who are like, oh, we have this declining enrollment and what's going on. That's where this number becomes, I think, really important to them. Because like I said, yeah, this is a shockingly high, I mean, the number being so high is in itself shocking, but it's really not when you think about the communities we come from and the fact that it's sort of always been this way, at least since I've been here in the 80s. And, you know, at the same time, like I said, we're still reaping the benefits of them living in town, even if they don't go to school here. But, you know, like I said, there's our declining enrollment, right? Because that puts us up over
It doesn't have
2,000.
to
Well, the question is
Yeah,
this a trend?
historically, I don't
Has
think
this trended up over the last 5 years or not? That's the question,
We'd have to go back
really.
and
Yeah,
look.
that I don't know.
We'd have to go back and look, and
My
I
question is
don't necessarily think, I
are
think
these
it's a
K
pretty.
to 12 students?
Okay.
It's K to 12, you know, so if you're even looking at, so just even looking at, what is this? I think this is Hamilton's
Hamilton.
number? You know, there's 77 students in
Someone
private
was here.
kindergarten. You know, so,
So it would be interesting to find out,
who knows, there's
you know,
98
when the
students in first
you know,
grade.
financial crisis or
I'm
not,
sorry.
if they all come back.
Oh, wait,
Find out in 2 years,
my
right?
mistake, 21,
Happened in
21 students in
Manchester,
private
Essex.
kindergarten, not 77.
They-
I was reading the wrong.
When I was doing classroom observations over there, at lunch, the kids were all sitting on the floor right after the market collapsed, because they said, you know, all those kids were in private schools. When the market collapsed,
Right.
they all came back, and they didn't, the cafeteria wasn't big enough, so they were lining the halls for long distances, kids sitting down eating
We
their
had that
lunches.
phenomenon here,
And
yeah.
then when the market went back up, they all went back to private school.
Right.
It was impressive. I was like,
That's interesting.
why are all these people sitting on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know,
Dozens and
just even
dozens.
K to 5,
What happened?
there's 90 students just from Hamilton in private school. So, I mean,
I'm
it's
sorry, what?
K to 5, so breaking those down a little bit, K to 5, it's 90 students.
The selectmen over there are giving them money not to come in. Swing that over. Okay, they're probably
That's in Hamilton. Wenham's 29.
but it's a
Yeah.
strategy.
You're looking at another 120 kids in the elementary level that,
I have to
I
listen
don't know
to
where
the grade.
I don't know where we'd put them.
Right.
The new school.
Be a good problem.
Exactly. Nice problem. So anyway,
New school will accommodate.
All right. So if you flip over, so on 130, I did some descriptive stats for the middle school. You know, some of the individual class size data, you know, the mean class size is 21.9. You know, the most popular, or most of those classes are 23 is the most frequent number that comes up, that's the mode. You know, in the range here from 15 to 34 for the middle school. And then turn back one page, and same numbers for the high school.
How do I read the bar chart though, Mike? What's the bin? What is the bin refer to?
It's a histogram, so it's the number of times that number showed up in the table. So for example, so how many times did we have 23 students in a class? There's 40 sections with 23. There are
For how many times?
6 sections with 16.
16 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many
16
students are in a-
students. How many students
in a
are
classroom?
sitting in a classroom?
Oh, I see, okay, got it. Okay.
So,
Butts in seats.
Yeah.
That's a bit
yeah,
stat
how many,
form.
yeah. It's a good way to put bin in an acronym. For the high school, we're looking at an average just under 19. And again, that's the mean and the median. Again, 23 students was the most frequent class size that we have. There's 25 sections that have 23 students. So you can see the range there goes all the way down to 5. And then there are a few sections that are over 30. Generally, that's banned.
And those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids in a class, are those general ed? And are they all meeting separately, or are they sometimes in the same room at the same time?
General ed, they are meeting separately. A lot of them turn out to be our public speaking courses. Just tended not to get the enrollments.
I didn't even know those existed.
Yeah, so we have public speaking classes with Chris Shaler. The
Oh,
enrollments
those,
just,
like the improv and,
right.
Owen Bailey couldn't get into
Yeah,
that. It was very
the-
popular.
The classes didn't sign up this year. Another thing I took a look at, because I knew there were some questions about this, and I want to dig into this a little more deeply, was the advanced placement scheduling data for this year, and this kind of ties into what Peggy was talking about. So we ran 11 courses in advanced placement, 17 sections of those 11 different courses, and scheduled 323 seats. As I call them seats, it's not individual students. It could be one student taking up more than one seat. And that turned into a 93% rate for scheduling. So there were 22 students who had 25 requests that were not scheduled out of that. And on top of that, we also have 29 students who are enrolled in virtual high school advanced placement level classes. So as Eric said, for a lot of those kids, they couldn't get the AP that they wanted.
And usually the AP, they can't really get till their senior year.
No, I
it's
mean, we
juniors.
start them, yeah.
But I'm saying it's hard, it's really hard to get it, because I know several kids who couldn't
Depends.
get AP in junior.
AP English, definitely a senior class. Spanish.
History,
U.S. history's a
senior level.
Senior level, and
It depends on some of them.
Econ's
Some of
hard
the
to
other
get
ones.
into,
econ's hard to get into, psychology's hard to get into.
yeah.
So only 8% of the requests weren't fulfilled.
Weren't fulfilled.
Yeah. Well, and you might not be ready as a junior to take an AP class, so you might not ask for it, so,
Right.
yeah.
So,
All right,
okay.
next.
So we're going to the second. What we got?
We out of that?
Yeah, unless there's any other questions.
Well, okay, I'm not gonna, I'll ask next year.
Next year.
I just make that like an
Next year,
assumption, like I'm gonna
2019.
run.
I was just gonna say,
Next
like,
year,
are you announcing?
Yeah.
No.
You good?
Yeah, okay, gotta go.
All right. Next is Long Meadow update.
My pen back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Still with your pen. You want to do it? You want me to do it?
Emma,
I can do it.
137.
Okay. So, as a follow-up to our last discussion on October 24th, we have a summary here prepared of our meetings regarding the Long Meadow property. Our first meeting was on Tuesday, November 27th, and that was actually with Jim Farnham, who's the owner of One Long Meadow Way. And as it kind of puts out there, Mr. Farnham reached out to me after, I believe, reading in the Chronicle that we were talking about Long Meadow.
Who knew people read
So,
that?
Hey. So he reached out, sent an email to me, and I invited him in to sit down and talk about things. So he has complete site control over One Long Meadow Way. These are the things we've learned about this, which is about 4 acres. The Farnhams have leased their property until the end of June of 2020, but the lease is transferable. Mr. Farnham has an asking price for one Long Meadow Way. He is very interested in selling, and selling quickly. And the asking price he quoted to us is $1.325 million. And then on the following day, we met with Andrew DeFranza, and learned this from Mr. DeFranza. So Harbor Light has site control over numbers 3 and 5 Long Meadow Way, which is approximately 15.8 acres, and they're owned by the Millers. In order to maintain site control beyond April of 19, Harbor Light must close on the property with the Millers, who provide interest-only financing for up to 24 months. Harbor Light's negotiated purchase price for 3 and 5 Long Meadow is $2.915 million. Harbor Light is not actively pursuing development of the site, either individually or in a partnership with an investor. So, you know,
Actually, just waiting for the fireworks to go off in Hamilton.
Mr. DeFranza's ready to be out. Let's put it that way. Just
Parking lot dreams coming.
So if I could,
as is Mr. Farnham.
if I could add just a little
Then
context
domain, as
on the
I say.
site itself.
Take it over.
The site is,
Long and thin.
it's very, it's
Narrow, right?
narrow
Yeah.
and very, very deep.
Right.
So if you think about Long Meadow Way, which is the last road before you get to the high school, the properties that we're talking about are not the properties that are on 1A.
Right.
Right.
If you were heading towards the high school from here, the first property right before Long Meadow Way is number 721 Bay Road. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
And then
Oh,
the
that's just
property just beyond Long Meadow Way is number 743 Bay Road,
Right.
not what we're talking about.
That one's for sale though, too, right?
It's just sold.
So as you
It's
enter,
sold, yeah.
as you enter Long Meadow Way, and there's a little cul-de-sac down the end, that property's number
The
1.
domain, yeah, totally.
And then there's an easement that runs along
Our fence.
our property line
Excuse me.
back to number 3 and number 5, which is the majority of the property owned by the Millers.
Interesting.
Just to give you some context in terms of what we're talking about here.
Right.
So this is,
So
is this-
So
we'll
we have a
schedule this at a
recommended
future
next-
Never
date.
recommended next step.
Now, is this the full memo? Because I wasn't sure if you ended it or,
It's the full memo.
That's it.
okay.
They made it
Yeah.
perfectly fit on one page.
Yes.
And there's a recommendation at the end.
Yeah.
This footer should really be lower.
Okay,
Give you
thanks.
a little bit.
Thanks, buddy.
All right.
I
What's this?
recommend the next step would be to schedule an executive session, hopefully for, what is our next meeting? December
December
19th?
Yep.
For the 19th, to really kind of talk
Okay.
strategy about this.
Sure.
So between now and then, can you get property cards from the town?
What does that mean?
Is that-
So
I
if
don't
you
know.
were a realtor,
Yeah,
you would have a property card. So it's from the assessor's office.
So I have
And
also,
it'd be like a picture of a map, and
We have
it'll,
all- we have all-
it'll have the assessed value, and it'll have the,
okay.
how the property is assessed, like the land is assessed at this, and the building is assessed at this, and
And
literally, if you just call them up and ask for the property card, they'll pull it for you.
And so part of the property,
And it's
the
probably
back
on a
part-
website, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right,
The back part of 5 Long Meadow has got wetlands too, so.
That would be on the property card, probably.
so
Yeah.
according to Mr. Farnham, he talked about kind of the topography of the land. So number 1 is very flat. The front part of number 3, which is the next piece of property, is
Yep.
very flat.
Okay.
And then as you get back into number 5, towards the back half of number 5, it runs down towards the river.
Yep.
Neither of us have
been back there.
ever been back there yet.
And so
Field trip.
if we were gonna
I have.
put them side by side to the high school, would 5 start like at the track, or would it be further back than the track,
So-
or?
I think 5 is the baseball field, right?
One is closer to the, that's
Yeah.
a good picture.
So where the
It's a
baseball
satellite
field
picture.
is right at
That's
the end
3.
of number 3.
Up there.
Because sometimes we park
Hold
there
on,
when it's a
let
cold
me
baseball
get
game to watch.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
So,
That's all.
That gives me an
and
idea,
they used
thanks.
to, and it used to be a while ago, we used
So the
property,
middle,
which is now they now redid it, so the horse field was used as some field space
so
in the
roughly
past.
the middle of number one, which is the front piece, is
Even with the track,
even with the beginning of the track.
Okay.
Okay.
part of the track that's closest to
Okay.
the high school.
And so that's the Farnham's property.
Yep.
So that, sorry.
Yep.
That's Jim and Linda's house, right? Number one. This is the
Yep.
beginning of number one. And
She's looking at,
she's got a different,
She's got it
slightly
up.
different perspective.
she's got it up.
Oh, look at that.
Nerd.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is,
Okay, yep, that's easy to see.
the house in the bottom left is,
That's the Farnham's house.
that's the Farnham's house,
Yep.
not that.
That's the Millers.
The button
So-
over here?
So by the baseball field, that other is all turnout for horses right now. This all,
Start the polo team.
This is the beginning of number one.
they play polo.
Farnham's house.
Yep,
So is my son.
So the middle of their property is roughly
yeah,
where the track. This is,
I'm telling you, you're gonna buy it, build a nice rink.
the Farnham's property goes up to
I'm
here.
serious this time.
This is three.
It's a big sports, but like, the.
I get a buddy.
So we're looking at
I'm telling you,
this.
the ice rink at my
This
school.
is the,
Right, it's that
Yeah.
white line. It's the white line.
We were at the,
The white line.
Yeah.
And their property goes right to the track?
Yeah, no, it goes, there's a,
No.
we have a fence right there.
Oh, okay, I thought you
Right
said,
there.
I thought I heard you
Yep.
say it goes to
Okay.
the track.
The visitor bleachers are like right on the fence line.
Oh,
There's
oh,
like
I'm
no
sorry, I misunderstood, yeah.
separation.
I thought you meant the other way. You were talking
All right, so that'll be on a next
19th?
agenda.
For December 19th?
Which I think we already
Okay.
penciled in.
Can we maybe have it executive session early instead of late, if it's possible?
Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I would too.
Oh, yeah, because usually at the end of the night, I don't want to talk to
trying to get
anybody.
here.
Yeah,
Other
no.
person.
Yeah,
Just getting here by 6:30 for it with a quorum to do it, but yeah.
Yeah, all right.
and we could do the executives, I don't know, and if you can't, then you can't. But we could do the executive session before we did
know
the
that
warrants,
position
or we could do the
and do the
warrants and
public.
then the executive session and then open the meeting or
I
something.
would do the warrants first, so we don't have
So
to keep
Dawn.
Dawn
So Dawn's on
hanging
her.
around.
Yep.
All right, we're paying him to watch
So,
us.
so if we had the warrants.
Two
it would
warrants
still
and then
start.
executive session, and then,
No, no, I know.
that sounds good.
You still have to pay fair market value.
Oh, I know. No, no, no,
Okay.
I didn't mean like that.
Oh, okay.
Like
You should
that.
turn off
You
your
should
mic,
turn off your mic when you say stuff like that.
Jean.
Okay.
Next.
All right, superintendent goals. I crossed out the wrong one again.
All right, ready? So, what page am I on here? 138? The look, eyes are failing at the late hour. So, I haven't actually had the chance to present my improvement goals for this year to the committee, so we're gonna do it now. I mean, obviously, I've been working on them since September anyway, but, and a lot of them haven't been a surprise. So just to kind of review what the goals actually are. So for goal one, it's working with the Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction and the elementary and middle school principals to ensure all students in grades K through 8 have access to instruction in the mathematics standards for mathematics. And that would be really the implementation of our new mathematics programs from kindergarten through grade 8. Offering trainings, holding MCAS data days, and it's one thing actually I didn't bring up with Peggy when Peggy was here. It's something that we've really tried to change the culture about how we look at our results. When I first got here, nobody looked at our MCAS results in our buildings. It just didn't happen. And so it's something that, you know, Peggy and I have worked on over the last 2 years to really institute this, where we have grade level teams of teachers that are spending you know, at least a half a day each, going through their test results, saying, okay, you know, what surprised us? Where do we think, you know, do we have curricular issues that we need to address? You know, are there other issues where we need more support, to really look at, you know, how are we doing and what can we do to change, you know, and improve our performance. We're also going to look at using learning walks to monitor our implementation, as Peggy talked about, seeing those things happening with math and talking to the teachers about them. And also facilitating communication with parents. I know Craig Hovey's already done some work around that with parents at the middle school. It's part of his back-to-school message to everybody about what these programs are going to look different, and parents are going to have questions. So we definitely want to continue to communicate about about the math program.
And there used to be the ELA and the math coach person. Do they still exist?
We do have both, yeah. So that's a curriculum coordinator for English Language Arts and a curriculum coordinator for math, and so.
Yeah, we just didn't hear anything about them, so I just was curious, okay.
Still are, yes. They both work for K through 5
Right.
only, and then the curriculum leader
Right.
at the middle and high school are 6 to 12. So to look at that, we have the products and the benchmarks that'll come out of those actions, and the evaluation indicators. Standards 1, A through C is the teaching, the student learning standard. Standard 2, letter C, standard 3B, and standard 4D. Going on to the next one, we have goal 2, it's professional practice. And this is to build the capacity of our administrators to faithfully implement the educator evaluation system. And I mentioned this earlier, that we had a change to the rubric, and so we've done a lot of work around that right now. Because we had focused we'd used the old rubric to focus in on what standards we were asking teachers to work on in their evaluation, and those standards didn't exist anymore necessarily. So we've done as I said, a review and identified new standards that we're asking teachers to focus on. So, we've communicated that actually through teachers. We actually did a rework of our teacher evaluation webpage on our website just over the last couple of weeks. Give teachers, a frequently asked questions section and an overview of what we're looking at. Making sure all the timelines and all the forms are all in one place for people to access them. So, and the other piece we want to work on is calibration with the leadership team. So, doing shared walkthroughs, making sure that that no matter what evaluator you may have coming into your room, that you're going to get a similar piece of feedback from that person. So we've got administrators all over doing a lot of shared walkthroughs right now, and they're actually even bringing teachers with them on those shared walkthroughs. So been a pretty successful program so far this year. We'll keep working on that, and the standards, the evaluation indicators that will be addressed are listed there.
And your role in this is?
To coordinate and oversee, and I did the write-up and presentations, and redid the webpage myself, actually. So
Okay.
a lot of this work will happen through especially with the calibration through leadership team meetings as well.
So you're not doing the training per se? Is that, is that part of your role?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
For goal number 3, there's a district improvement goal. That's to develop a new strategic blueprint document to guide our improvement efforts for the next 5 years. I originally said we were going to have this done probably mid-year, and and I had said, I think a couple of meetings ago, that it didn't look like that was going to happen. I really think we're in the process of working it out, but it may take longer than January to get that done. One of the reasons behind that is a large number of our leadership team has actually just completed a course called Change School, and I think it really is. I think the work that we did before taking that course, I also took it, it's going to look a lot different now that we've taken this course, and we're actually going to spend about 2 hours tomorrow morning going back over the blueprint document and saying, okay, how did what we learned over the last 8 weeks in Change School really, impact what we're thinking about, and how will this change that document? So, as I said, I think.
So you're thinking maybe the end of the year?
I'm hoping before that. I would hope March or April.
Okay.
But
And can I just ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
So I know when you came in, you did a blueprint, and I think you've done another blueprint. Is this something that's legally required, or is it just a best practice?
Just a best practice.
Okay.
You know, I was even looking, the state's still offering trainings for superintendents on how to do this process.
Okay.
So it's the process I went through with the new superintendent's induction.
Yeah, I
program.
remember that.
That's how they
But
did it.
I,
Yeah, and it's just,
it's not something we're submitting,
no.
so the
No, but
deadline
it's- I'm
is
trying to
really
think
up
what-
to us to
What their
decide.
program is called, it's like Pathways for Success, right. The deadline is self-imposed, it's to get it done.
Okay.
Because it is one of those things you could talk about forever and never actually put it
Sure.
to, put it to rest, so. So that's what we're looking at. As you can see, we're gonna still work on those, we have a draft developed, we're working on it still. The idea is to get that into some kind of form that we would then go back to our stakeholder groups and have them, again, give feedback on it, revise again to incorporate that feedback, and then, as I said, January is gonna be too soon for us, I know it is right now. But then to have a final document back in front of the school committee for your feedback as well, and then do a communication of that afterwards. And so we can see the standards, standards 3 and 4 are the ones we're looking at on that. And then goal 4, also for district improvement, that's to implement the ALICE crisis response protocols. And so we're training a team from the district and the local public service organizations as ALICE instructors. We completed that back in September. Over 50 people are now ALICE instructor certified. We're in the process of having everybody achieve ALICE basic certification. As I said, they've done the online portion, and we've started it in the in-person trainings for the middle and high school faculty back in the last week in November. And we'll be doing that same in-person for the elementary teachers, I believe, starting at the end of February. I'll go back and look at that, but we have the dates mapped out to do that. And then that last piece is the next to last line there is to train the students on that protocol, but that'll happen once we're all comfortable as a faculty with what we need to do. And we'll have to talk about how we're going to roll that out with students.
Like, yeah, I'd like to hear a little more about that before it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually been getting some interesting, I've asked a few colleagues about what they've done. Scott Morrison, for example, over at Tri-Town, and said, because that's an elementary-only district. I was
Right,
like, Scott,
right.
what did you do? And it's kind of an interesting answer. He said for K-2, he didn't do very much. The expectation was that the kids are going to take their lead from their teachers, and so if the teachers know what to do,
Right.
then we're not really going to get students that riled up. And so I think that's something, we'll probably want to
I know
consider.
Reading does a very extensive one, which I was kind of a little uncomfortable with myself, so.
Some of the people in my cohort, they talk about what they're doing down in Kansas and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not comfortable with that at
No
all.
way.
Yeah. And then that last piece there is to revise the crisis manual. As part of being an ALICE certified organization, they've actually provided us with a lot of materials to help that process along, and also looking at some of the stuff from the STARS team has a really good manual that I've been working on and trying to get a draft together that then will go to our sort of steering committee of our building principals and the public safety officials, have them, the way the plan is written, it's actually for a school level plan, so that all the principals would have to adapt it to meet their own unique circumstances for, depending on what building they're in. The really interesting one that's come up is the middle school is the only building with a second floor.
Sure.
Slides.
Wow.
That's a question where we're all gonna try and figure
That
out, I
whole-
mean, is how,
Well, yeah, especially because the stairs
Yeah,
aren't
I mean,
anywhere, they're all at the
Only one
ends,
floor.
so.
Yeah.
training, the Alice protocols are, to learn how to hang, and then,
Yeah.
to
They
lower
have
the.
those fire ladders too,
The gym curriculum.
those chains,
They do
Yeah,
have
I
that in
mean-
the gym curriculum, because they do the ropes course.
Pelling.
Yeah, how to
Rappelling
rappel
class.
down there and something
those
like
fire
that, so.
ladders you hook
Yeah, it's
on
just
and
those,
up.
those
Basic
interesting
course
things that we're in the
rappelling.
process of doing. I just got, Craig Hubby just did a test of all of the phones in the middle school to make sure they all called 911. Those are the kinds of things.
They
that
don't
we're all-
always.
They do. was happy to report that they all will reach 911, the
That's an
Hamilton
advance
911.
over
they're
my
working.
school.
Do they
We
also
just want them to
notify
call
the
the office.
administration when you call 911?
I don't think they do.
I know we received training on that today. When you dial 911,
Yeah.
all the administrators
Yeah.
are also notified, so it saves time.
Yeah, I don't think our phone service is
So our,
up to that.
our technology is,
Yeah, it's not Essex Tech.
We have a direct can.
the technology you have in your building is a lot different.
Well,
than
we're
we have.
still having
Hey,
issues
the fact
with
that you have
power staying on
phones
at the
in
high
your
school
room
and middle
is a
school.
huge advantage
Yeah.
over some
Generators.
schools.
We just want
Don't need
intercoms that work.
generators.
Right, I mean,
That
that's,
would be nice.
that's one
I
thing that
get
we are
texts,
also
why
noticing
do
is,
we have no power?
you know, the intercom.
Yeah, and if power would be nice, regular.
Yeah, just having, you know, a stable
Consistent power.
power supply is a good one. But again, you know, we're looking at, you know, intercoms, and so the intercom in the gym doesn't work in
Yeah.
high school.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, that's a hole.
Yeah,
We
but
know
that's
it.
been on our capital
It's on
plan
our
for
list.
4 years, right?
Right, it's on our list. We know about it. We just have to
Stand in the hallway with a bullhorn.
get the money together to put it together, so.
We can't get approved for a bullhorn.
Get a
Okay.
Paul
And yeah, and
Revere
so
review
that's,
by the
you know,
town.
even and I didn't actually put this on there as an action item, but really, you know, before we do a student training, we're gonna do a parent
Yeah,
night. You know, I've had that discussion with Ken
Yeah, that's a good
Richards
idea.
to do that,
that's a good idea.
just to get parents to understand what this is all about. and what's gonna look
Well,
like.
and also what Mary Beth Ting had said when she came, that was, to me, impactful, is that it's not just enough to know how to do this in a school. Every person should know
How to do it
what to
anywhere.
do anywhere.
Right.
So if you brought parents here and trained them in the
Yeah.
way that their student was gonna be trained, it would be advantageous to them personally, as well as just to have them, to be able to have the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know if how hands-on with the training we would get to. I think
mean,
we
if-
do more of the
but-
slideshow.
And the
Simple.
scope, the scope of what we're trying to train right now
It's
is
a lot.
close to 500 people.
Right.
Right? All of our staff, all of the, you know, fire safe, the
Police and
public
fire
safety
safety.
folks. So, I mean, that's the focus right now.
Yep.
No, but before you roll it out to kids, you know, it's not like, it's just like the sex ed thing. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
You invite the parents in to see the same training.
Parents
Right.
knew what they were doing before.
Yeah.
I know, but it's it's what you're gonna communicate to the kids. David,
Sorry, it's getting late.
Yes.
it's getting late.
Okay.
Yes.
What's left?
So I'm wondering if it makes more sense to, can we end on
What?
executive session?
You can't do an executive session
It's not supposed
tonight.
to. I thought we were gonna do one for.
We don't have one scheduled.
All right. Oh, that was the last meeting, we were talking about it.
Right. We didn't talk.
All right, so this is my mistake, because I was really thinking these next two would be an executive session.
Do we wanna tie those into the one next week?
So maybe we can table it for next week's executive session? I mean, next meeting, not next week.
Since we're having one anyway?
So the primary purpose for the next meeting is our annual budget presentation kickoff.
And we've got other things.
So,
That
I'm just
night, too.
saying, getting close to 10 o'clock.
Yeah, and we don't have,
Well,
I have about 3 hours of work ahead of me.
so.
And we had a meeting
Put
last
other
night,
stuff on
so
it.
that's a lot of time.
yeah.
Right, but we've actually been pushing
We actually have
this
school choice on too.
salary for months at this point.
So we need an hour for the budget.
Right.
I think we can, because then we come back from break, and then
Yep.
we've got a meeting the first night, so
Yep.
I think an hour would be sufficient.
Just if this conversation
the
takes
next
more
meeting.
than half an hour, it puts us well after 10 o'clock.
Yeah, and I'm not up for this
Well,
right now.
I mean, we've been through the superintendent review process at this point, so to set the salary for 19 really shouldn't take that much time.
So are these two the same thing?
So, no, I guess not really. They could be tied together. You know, we're looking at for the salary really just are what we did past 2 years that we did it in executive session, or?
We've
We've
always,
always done it in executive session, then we vote it out in regular session.
because it says in the contract, in the drop box, it says something about all salary increases are by amendment to the contract. So because we were talking about the contract, we've always done it in executive session. So,
You can only use executive session if you're going to negotiate, though.
right, so if we were going to decide what to offer, that would be our strategy on the negotiation.
Okay.
So since there's not been any report given, I don't know even what the strategy is,
Which is why we need an executive.
so.
Yeah, I'm not real clear on that. Or I don't have enough
So
information
I
to
don't know what you
discuss
mean
it.
by strategy. It's,
There's
Nope.
no information to discuss
So
it.
we don't, so if we were going to talk about a number, we might want to talk about what the strategy would be about offering that particular number for the purpose of something else. But it's not what you want to do, then that's not what you want to do, but it's what we've done before.
so,
Yeah, I know for at least this will be for 4 years, it's all been done in executive session, discussed
again,
strategy.
this is my fault because, like I said, this was set up for executive session 2 weeks, and I wasn't thinking to clarify when we set up this meeting to do that. So, sorry.
Mike, it
I
looks like we've
forgot,
got a
I
bunch of
actually really
student
forgot that
groups coming.
that we had a
Yeah.
post that it was going to
I-
go to executive session.
I mean, I would propose that we table this till next meeting
So,
to go into executive session to strategize.
so, all right. Peggy.
Somebody just seconded it.
Shake the micro machines guy. All right. I'm sorry, Mike, we have to push this another, it's fine.
But, you know, we should check around and see if everybody could come at 6:30. And
Yeah.
if we, and if everybody can't come, then we don't do it because it's not fair.
Right,
Yeah.
no, I agree.
We talking about?
I'll see what I can do.
And it's
We'll
not
move it.
pressure,
We'll
Gene.
put like warrant
What we
for
need to
stuff
do is
buy
we
you
need to
back.
have a
I'm just
majority
giving you a hard
here.
time.
So David,
You could rearrange
could I
the
just point
agenda
out that we've
too.
got a bunch of student groups scheduled to come at the next meeting, so we,
And you get a public hearing, so
right,
On what?
Has it been advertised yet?
school choice.
Choice.
it's a week in advance, so it has.
Hush.
Excuse me.
Bless.
Has it been published?
Not yet. It's
So
okay.
could we do the hearing? I mean, I understand the logic for doing it sooner because of all of the open houses and everything that's going on now, but is there a way we could do it
You have to push it to
January
January 2nd.
2nd?
No one's gonna attend that.
But it's not.
What's that?
I mean, nobody's attended, so
They all have to come and,
we just have to have a majority of us here, so.
they give us false facts about why it's a good
Well,
idea.
actually, if that's the case, right, if Jean were to have difficulty coming, we could still have the hearing, but maybe we start the hearing at 6.
Oh, that's actually a pretty good idea.
That's a really good idea.
Because we really just have to have the majority of us
Right,
here.
we just
Then we
can't.
do the warrants,
Yeah.
and then we do start the executive session, and hopefully, you know, by 6:45, or
I could
if
probably
it's
do that.
7, we'd be
So in the
ready to go.
executive session, you're gonna have Longmeadow,
Yep,
the superintendent's salary.
Yep.
Yep.
And then the superintendent's contract? You could be in
That's
there for
what
an
it
hour,
says.
an hour and a half.
yep,
But
Yes.
my point is, that we've got
Yeah, people
student,
coming.
we've got student groups coming.
I know, but if we start at 6, and when they're in there for an hour, it would be a 7 o'clock start.
I'm just being sensitive to kids that have to do homework.
I know,
How about teachers that have to do homework?
right, yeah,
He's gotta go home.
How about teachers who have to lesson plan?
yeah. Okay. So, all right. So here's the deal.
You
We've
starting
just,
the choice hearing at 6, or is it?
Yeah.
Let's do the school choice at 6.
Okay.
Executive
How long does
session
the
at
hearing need to
6:30.
be?
Right, call
It
order
doesn't
at
depend.
6:30.
It doesn't, it's
depends
usually
on how
5,
many people show up, but it can be literally
Could be
10
nobody.
minutes.
and then 6:15 do warrants.
Or do we have to post
You have to
the
post,
entire length of the?
we have to post
Yeah.
when the meeting starts.
Yeah, we have to
you don't
post
have
the
to post
meeting
when the meeting
starts.
starts. You don't have
Just
to
say-
post the end time.
You don't have to post the end time of a hearing?
Yeah, you don't have to
So-
post the end time.
I don't know, I'll look.
'Cause I remember one time we actually sat here twiddling our thumbs.
No,
waiting
it's-
for
But
you
that's
don't-
because you
Yeah.
posted a separate meeting for when
Because
the
it was
next one
separate.
starts.
So if you do 2 different start times, then you have to then
But if you
wait to
just
start the
do
second.
start and just keep rolling, then.
Yeah, then you don't have to,
I thought you had to post a separate meeting for, like, the regular meeting, though, for the
No.
the public hearing.
no.
Okay.
At least the planning board doesn't, and the zoning board doesn't,
You do choice
and the
at
board of
6,
selectmen doesn't.
Call order at 6:15.
Well, it's interesting, 'cause I see the, I see that on the,
warrants, and then
But they don't
hopefully
post
be
them as
done
separate
by
meetings.
6:30.
They're all in one meeting.
Yeah, if you keep it all at one meeting, and see, the problem is when you do start times, that's when you get into trouble.
Budget
Then you sit there and do nothing.
Well, and
We
then-
can start a budget presentation at 9 or 9:30 at night.
We have DECA coming in.
Should we have,
Start work at 6.
Why don't,
should
can
we
I,
have 2 meetings?
I think you're better off moving choice to the 5th.
5th.
It's our second, whenever.
January
January
2nd.
Oh, I was like, 5th, what is that?
We're just gonna have a meeting just for that.
sorry, I'm out of town on the 5th.
January 2nd.
Okay, so let's do that.
That's fine.
I know we've talked about this for a long time, so have we decided that we're just gonna do donations and go home?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Calendar meeting. It's supposed to happen in November, but
I'm willing to make a
Okay,
motion.
are we, should I do the
do
donations?
the donations,
Can I
please.
do the donations?
Yeah.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept the donation from the class of 1968 for the 50th reunion, $500 for high school library and technology.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous.
I move that to accept the donation from the Friends of the Hamilton Wenham Regional High School, Miles Rivers Middle School for $750 for an 8th grade Freedom Trail trip.
Awesome. Second.
Very cool.
All those in favor? Sorry, spaced out.
I move that the Hamilton Wenham Regional School Committee accept the donation for the boys' basketball boosters for $1,400 for a .5 assistant coach.
Second.
All those in favor?
I move that we accept the donation for the First Robotics grant for $4,000 from First Robotics and I almost got that wrong, 11,000 from Hamilton Wenham Ed Fund.
Those are for 2 different things, aren't they?
No, it's the same.
It's the same thing?
Two
Yeah.
grants from
Okay.
different
It's 2 different
funders
grants.
for
for
the
the
Okay,
same
perfect.
robotics program.
All right. Second.
All those in favor?
I move that we accept the donation from the Cell Signaling Education and Science Grant for purchase of Pasco gas sensors for $1,200.
Sure, second. I don't even know what that is.
David, all in favor?
Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to move it on.
I was listening
That's
to
unanimous.
Michelle. I thought she was going through. So, as always, want to thank everyone for their generous donations. That's part of what makes this district so great. This first robotics grant is huge.
And especially Hamilton Wenham Ed Fund for always being
As
so
always.
generous.
Seems like I'm
Always.
saying that every 2
Go
weeks, but
get your Christmas
on
trees
Sunday.
Yes,
Excuse
and
me.
make a generous donation while you're there.
yes.
Just painted my ceiling
Okay.
from where the Christmas tree was too big last year, so. So, no, topics for next meeting?
I
Oh,
just
nothing?
have,
think we're
I have one little thing, or it doesn't have to be next meeting, but an update on changes on the school handbooks. Handbook?
Which is
Ooh.
on.
I had it on there
Had
for next
that
week, but
somewhere.
we were also just looking at pushing it off.
It was on the last meeting.
It was
it
on
showed.
for November.
The one that got
I know, I
canceled.
saw it, so that's why I'm just saying, just so we don't forget it.
It's all
Still there.
there.
Okay.
We're working on it, but I think we may have to move it off again.
Okay, are we set with everything?
Yep.
I move that we move to adjourn at 9:55.
Second.
All those in favor?